Broadcast has been set.
The time is now 5:06, and the January 30th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting will come to order. So good evening and welcome to the January 30, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting. I am Jonathan Briggs, Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee and member of the board. It brings me great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, and I look forward to our work tonight. And I want to announce the new appointment of vice chair for the Policy and Governance Committee, who is our student member of the board, Ms. Rain Rivera Forbes. She is not here yet. I'm sure she'll be here at some point this evening, but want to just, celebrate the fact that we have a student member we had a dynamic student member who was the chair last year, and we're just really excited for her to be in such engagement with the board and with the committee. And so want to acknowledge her and her leadership there. We will now have introductions of our committee members, starting with board members, followed by administration staff, then board office staff, and the board legal counsel. So I will turn it over to whoever would like to go first, but one of our committee members, so Dr. Miller or Vice Chair Walker.
Hi, I'll get started. Hey, everyone. I am Lolita E. Walker. I'm the Vice Chair for the Prince George's County Board of Education, also a member of the Policy and Governance Committee. Great to be here.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Miller, member for the Policy and Governance Committee.
Great. Board staff.
Oh, could I?
Hello, I'm Ravel D. Fitzpatrick. I am the new director for the Board of Education.
Welcome, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Cindy Adlin. I'm one of the administrative secretaries in the board office and also the policy and governance support staff.
And Mrs. Walsh.
Good morning. Oh, good morning. Good evening. I'm Robin Walsh, the Director of Government Relations, Compliance and Procedures, and I'm happy to say we have two members of the Student Services Department here, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Tisa Holly. I'm the Director of Student Services.
Good evening. I'm Richard Moody, and I'm the Supervisor for Student Engagement and School Support in Student Services.
Board counsel. We can't hear you, Mr. Whitley. Still can't hear you. Yeah.
How about now?
Yep, you can.
Perfect. Dennis Whitley III with the law offices of Shipley and Horn here on behalf of, I'm sorry, I'm board counsel, I'm sorry.
Great, thanks so much. And Dr. Zipporah Miller, we want to make sure we acknowledge you as well.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Zipporah Miller, board member for District 5.
Great. Well, so great to have all of you here this evening, and a special welcome to Rivel. We've been hearing such amazing things about you, and the board is looking forward to working with you. So we're excited to see you during our next in-person. With that said, we're going to move to the adoption of the meeting agenda. So colleagues, before I call a motion to accept the agenda for tonight, please be aware that it will vary slightly. After item 2.0, we'll consider item 4.7, policy 5143, bullying, harassment, or intimidation. This is being done to accommodate the schedules of our visiting speakers. So may I have a motion to adopt the January 30th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Well, given that it's Dr. Juanita Miller and I, Dr. Miller, we're going to be on for a minute or two, okay?
Yeah, I can second it too. I think I can second.
Thank you.
All right, so second. It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. The January 30th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda is adopted as amended. We're going to move on to item 1.4, approval of the committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the December 19, 2023 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes?
I move that we
So
adopt.
moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Second.
Okay. Thank you so much. Is it moved and seconded? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The December 19, 2023 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes are approved. We're now going to move to public comments. And right now there are no registered public comment speakers this evening. So registered public comment speakers can be live, pre-recorded using video or audio or written. And I just want to say that we always do want to hear from our constituents, from our members of the public, because the decisions that we make impact you. So your voice is really vital, and we welcome it at all times. We will now address item 4.7, policy 5143, bullying, harassment, or intimidation. I'll yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to introduce her guest, Mr. Richard Moody, Supervisor of Student Engagement and School Support, and Dr. Tisa Holly, Direction Student Services, and provide the committee with an update on policy 5143, bullying, harassment, or intimidation. So, Ms. Welsh.
Good evening. So at one of our last meetings, Dr. Z. Miller requested that asked the question about what interventions are in place for both the person who does the bullying as well as the targeted student who has been bullied. And so I did reach out to our Associate Superintendent of Student Services, since all bullying, harassment, and intimidation, the policy and the procedure all fall under that division. And she recommended that Dr. Holly and Mr. Moody come and talk about this, because they are involved with this pretty significantly and can answer many of your questions. So I will open the floor, I guess, to any questions anyone has, and then also have them share what they know, how it operates right now in terms of both the bullier and the targeted student.
So, Mrs. Welch, is this the time to ask questions, or is there going to be a presentation first?
We're going to have a presentation and I think Ms. Welsh, you were passing it to Mr. Moody first, and then
Either one, they can first talk and then there can be questions.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Greetings. Well, good evening once again, everyone. Thank you all for allowing us to be able to present. I will start with a presentation and then definitely open up the floor for comments. Share my screen. All right, so tonight's focus is on student interventions. So to be able to, before we delve into interventions, we want to address the areas of prevention, what's being done preventatively in an effort to reduce bullying. And so we've broken this in the area of what's being done concerning our staff, what's being done concerning our students, and then what are we doing concerning our parents as well. So every year, Prince George's County, in alignment with AP 5143, all schools have to submit their anti-bullying plan. Then we also, this is something that was new this school year, we realized that the bullying reports go directly to principals once they are submitted via the app. And so principals are inundated with numerous tasks throughout the day. And so this year we put in a BHI, bullying, harassment, and intimidation point of contact. Those are additional staff members that will receive notification about the fact that incident has been reported, so that they too can be involved to make sure that we adhere to the timelines as far as how long it's to take for an investigation to take place and when it needs to be documented and submitted to our office. We provide quarterly technical assistance training to school staffs. In addition, principals in particular can reach out to request training just for their school-based staff, and that could be done virtually or in person. Our staff throughout Prince George's County continues to take the Safe Schools videos. And then also something that is new as of last year, we have a Google investigation form. And so this allowed us to streamline and be systematic in how schools report the investigation, so that when reporting to MSDE, we have all the responses that we need. Prevention concerning our students. So October every year nationally is Bullying Awareness Month. So our principals and other support staff are encouraged to have bullying prevention activities on campus to educate, to empower, and to make sure that students, parents, and other stakeholders are aware of the importance of making sure that we keep our schools safe. PGRAS, which Mr. Moody oversees our SGAs, during Bullying Prevention Month, there was a presentation to encourage our SGAs to be able to host campaigns and to promote that message so that it's not just an adult led message, but really inciting student voice and allowing students to serve as the advocates to keep our schools safe. We have PBIS and restorative approaches that continue to be offices within our division of student engagement. Then also we have social emotional learning lessons. And so over the last school year, we've had teachers to become SAIL certified. We've also had leaders within our district to become leaders certified in our quest to become a SAIL saturated school district. And so not only are we having these courses, but providing opportunities for more lessons to be developed so that we can really have a repository of lessons to be able to allow our colleagues to pull from, and even having experts to be able to share within the school district, building to building, what are some of their best practices, because we realize the benefits of SAIL in our school and its impact on allowing students to feel connected, which is a way of reducing bullying. And then our other two areas that have been prevention for students, in looking at our research and data at the beginning of the school year, we started to see, which is a national trend, that we have more of our schools that are middle schools that have the highest number of reported incidences of bullying. And so what we came up with is a two-part series called The Great Conversation. And so it is a virtual school-wide assembly where there's a conversation around what is bullying, intended to empower the bystander, the targeted student, and even the offenders to be able to say, this is not something that is permissible, this is not something that's allowed, and we're not really going to have it in our schools. And then part two touches on conflict resolution, because we've also noted that sometimes incidences are reported as bullying, although it was an incident of conflict as opposed to it really being bullying. So really differentiating that and making sure that it is clear. And at the end of that virtual in-school assembly, a member of the mental health team, in addition to myself, we would actually be on campus so that during lunchtime, students would be able to come by if they needed to ask additional questions, if now they felt empowered to share about an incident that is taking place, then we would 100% be present to be able to take down those reports. The mental health clinician is able to provide the supports to the students to make sure that they feel safe and supported. And then lastly, we've developed and designed a school poster that simply says that we're going to report the bullies, and it provides the students with a QR code so that they can quickly scan the QR code and be able to report it, basically seeking to make reporting more accessible to all of our students throughout the district. And then as far as prevention, as it pertains to our parents, this year we were able to inform parents through a letter from Superintendent House concerning our stance as a district on bullying. And then also we were able to launch our first Bullying Advisory Council, or BAC. And so this council consists of all stakeholders. So at school administrators, district administrators, our educators, our student support service staff, our parents, and even our students. And so this team has been put together to be able to explore and to develop strategy in our effort, once again, to reduce bullying in our school district. There are 3 areas of emphasis for the council, one being prevention through education. The other is in the area of intervention, consequences, and restoration. And then that third area is in the area of data monitoring and accountability. And then last school year, which we still see it as valuable, we were able to host a Wellness Wednesday webinar specifically on the topic of what every parent should know as it pertains to bullying, Administrative Procedure 5143. And at the beginning of the school year and at other points in the school year, we share this video with principals and ask them and encourage them to share this to make sure that we're continuing to educate our parents, making them aware of how it is that we govern ourselves as a district as far as keeping our students safe and our stance on bullying. So that's prevention. So now to intervention. So there are some interventions that are offered to all students. And when I reference all students, that's all students, meaning the targeted student, the student that has been identified as being bullied, and then the offender. So for all students, according to our administrative procedure, a parent meeting is to be hosted. And during that meeting with the parent, student, and administrator, a plan of action for the student is to be created. And so as we monitor and check in periodically, if that plan needs to be adjusted, it is adjusted. Group counseling is also provided for the students as a form of intervention. These sessions are geared towards developing empathy, improving communication, conflict resolution. We have our restorative practices, as I mentioned before. This is only used when all parties are in agreement and willing to participate and compliance, ensuring that we are following Administrative Procedure 5143. As it pertains to interventions for our targeted student, we also are paying attention to any signs or changes in behavior that might be attributed to the bullying incident. That's the classroom teacher, that's the professional school counselor, then it might even be the mental health clinician, anyone that is brought in on that student's plan to make sure that everyone is really cognizant and aware of that student's overall well-being. In communicating with the student, the communication is going to be that one of supportive, reassuring the student that the school environment is safe, and then promoting and maintaining open dialogue with the student, staff, and the parent, keeping everyone engaged, especially as we're going through that season and that period of restoration for that child. As it pertains to the offender, individual counseling is also one of the interventions that is used when a student is the offender. We also, as an intervention, may use the functional behavioral assessment, behavior intervention plans, and even behavior contracts. And so all stakeholders are included, and plans are put in place, and those are also reviewed until positive changes take place. Referrals. If the behavior is severe or the team considers underlying mental health issues, then that student will be referred to a mental health therapist that's assigned to the school. They also may be referred to SIT for other areas to be discussed and to be addressed for that student. And then also, re-entry meetings are also scheduled when the offender has been suspended. Upon their return, either the professional school counselor or the mental health clinician will meet with that student to go over the plan, the expectations, and to make sure that that student is ready to move forward in a productive and peaceful manner at the school. Within this PowerPoint, there are additional resources that we like to share just in how we are spreading the word as it pertains to students, parents, and even staff being able to report instances of bullying. And this also contains links to our bullying website, which also connects to our PGCPS Stop Bullying website. So with that stated, thank you all for your time. We open ourselves and yield the floor to questions.
Great.
I have
Thank
a question.
Well, so thank you first so much for that. for that presentation. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Colleagues, should this policy, so we'll pause there. I'll recognize hands in the order that they are raised. So if you're not speaking, we'd just love it if you could remain on mute, so that we can ensure that everyone speaks. And then Cindy, if we can have the timer up, 3 minutes per person, I'll go in the order of the hands that are raised. I'm going to start with Vice Chair Walker because I see her hand first. And Vice Chair Walker, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I wanted to first say thank you for the acknowledgement, and secondarily, thank you for the work that you all are doing on this topic, which is affecting our scholars so much. The first question that I had is, I do appreciate the reporting, the bully, and I do know that you said you have a QR code for those scholars that don't have phones, or that might be in lower grades, for instance, like first through maybe even sixth grade. Some of those scholars don't have it. I'm wondering if you would consider having maybe something on Clever that the parents could go in there if they're hearing from their scholars. That's the first thing that I would love to consider and make sure that we have a plan in place for those that don't have access to phones in the QR code. The second piece, and you can answer after, the second piece to this is I want to talk about the offenders as well. I appreciate the intervention there, but I also want, this is from a mom who, my son was bullied in the first grade. So I do have an opportunity to make sure that I can put that in. But then for the person on the other side, if it were my son that was being accused of bullying, I'm just wondering, what is the process by which you kind of investigate a bit before they end up on a bullying list for folks to be able to see? And when I say folks, I'm imagining that's administration, and it probably is on their record that is going to follow them. So if you could just talk to us about those so that we're clear when we're doing our own policy. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you for that. First, thank you for that recommendation about adding it to Clever. We'll make sure that happens. And then as far as the investigation process, so once a report has been submitted, then the administrative staff is then responsible for meeting and meeting with each student that's involved. So the targeted student, there's a conversation and notes are taken. Then also the offender student is spoken to. They're able to write down a statement throughout that investigation. If there are witnesses, then they are addressed as well. And so those statements are gathered. And so a decision as to whether or not the incident is substantiated or unsubstantiated is based off of the findings. So the findings is not because it was reported, then you are now considered to be the offender. It's upon investigation that the outcome is identified as either unsubstantiated or substantiated. And those documents are uploaded and forwarded on to our office.
Thank you. And then the last piece, do I have time, Cindy, or do I need the second round for this last question?
Second
Well,
round.
let me ask. Second round. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Walker. Dr. Zipporah-Miller.
Good evening, and thank you for recognizing me and bringing this back, because this is something that as we follow, I know the data points of phone calls and emails, but there's been numerous phone calls and emails that are coming in about bullying, and you are correct. They're coming in, Dr. Hawley, mostly from the middle school. So I have several questions, so I may need to go to second round. The first question has to do with the administrative procedure. In studying the robust resources that you have and steps that you are taking, I am really impressed with what we're doing as a system to ensure that we're preventing and also actions in order to ensure that we are addressing the problem on hand. What I find though is when I'm getting a lot of calls and emails, one, the child who's being offended took a while to report it. And so by the time they report it, they're distraught, right? So of course, as a parent, mom, dad, or guardian, they are like, we need help and we need to help now because now my child doesn't want to go to school, So most of the calls that I'm getting is, I'm going to the school and I want to be assured that my child will be safe. That's number one. And then the number two, I'm getting a lot of calls that say, I want to meet with the parents of the child who offended me, but the administration says they don't have to come in. So I went to the admin procedure to say, what's the policy, what's the admin procedure? That's where I was perplexed, because the admin procedure states that they may be invited. And what I'd like to propose is, could we make it so that they are invited, so that the steps that you talked about with the plan, with the counseling, because I know that that middle school child does not have a way to express themselves, thus it comes out in bullying. So we need to ensure that they have the appropriate resources so that they're not doing this to other children. So the support to the child who's being offended is encompassing the counseling and everything and them being safe, but also we need to ensure that the other child doesn't continue the bullying. So that was the first question. Could they be a space for, I'm not sure how it happens, for you to look at the admin procedure and make the appropriate changes so that that parent is invited to come in?
Excellent suggestion. I had a similar experience where the parent wanted to meet with the offender's parent, and I too went to the AP, and Dr. Faison and I engaged in dialogue. So it's not clearly stated as to what our real actions are on that matter. So we can definitely take the feedback to adjust, to update the AP. Mr. Moody?
Yes, Dr. Holly?
Yes. Were you trying to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I was making notes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Miller. We'll come back to you for a second round for the additional questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Holly. I believe Dr. Juanita Miller, I saw your hand up. I'm not sure if you have retracted your hand or if you just put it down by accident.
I put it down, but I just want to know, identify Mr. Rydell Fitzpatrick. I don't remember him being introduced.
Oh, he actually introduced himself. He let us know that this is not his first week. And I let him know that we're really excited. But if you want to introduce yourself one more time.
I apologize because I didn't hear.
Absolutely, no problem. I'm Ravel D. Fitzpatrick, and I am the new director for the Board of Education.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
New faces, so we got to make sure we know everyone is in the room. So I appreciate that. So we're gonna move to second round, and I'm gonna go with hands that are up. So if there's a hand that's up second round, then we'll just go in that order. And I'll recognize Vice Chair Walker.
Yes, following up on my last questions, the last piece was, I know sometimes some of our scholars that have IEPs some folks might have behavioral issues or things that's being worked on already. And I'm just wondering if you could take a look at what the procedure is you don't have to let me know, but so that their parents can be at the table as board member support. So they can, because what I found, and I hope it's not still the case, is that oftentimes because there are provisions inside of that plan, interventions to be able to happen. So I'm just hoping that the bullying doesn't continue while other procedures are happening there. Are you clear on what I'm saying? If not, I can give an example.
It really was the connection. It wasn't necessarily understanding the question, but your connection was going in and out. So we could not fully hear what you were asking or stating.
We got to the
part okay. I might be in a bad area. I can come.
Yeah. Well, no. We got to the part where you said parents at the table. So if you want to just wrap up that part, then I think we can get the rest of it.
I don't remember where that was, but if you got the gist of it, then that sounds good. It was about IEPs. It was about procedures have to happen by way of the IEPs already. And how are we ensuring that our interventions can go simultaneously without us not having to wait, because sometimes the bullying is happening during the other interventions that are already on the They
Got
don't
it.
seem to happen simultaneously because we have a step-by-step process, rightly so, if there is someone on an IEP. And so sometimes those steps are happening, but bullying might still be happening on the other side. So I'm looking to see if there can be simultaneous work if we see that with a student that does have a plan already in place, that if they are let's just say accused of bullying, that we have a plan that we can continue to investigate, but then also give them the interventions that you talked about today. I hope that was more clear.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank
Got
you.
it, Dr. Walker.
Great. Thanks so much, Vice Chair Walker. Dr. Zipporah Miller.
Thank you so much. So in following up about the administrative procedure, if possible, as you're scrubbing it, I know that was just one bullet point, but as you go in to make adjustments to that, would it be possible to scrub it just to make it more firm in terms of what is required to do in terms of parents coming in, whether it's the parent of those who were offended and the parents of the offender? If there are areas in which the policy needs to be changed, so we can know as a board, so that the AP is not in conflict with the board policy. So that was the first part. But my second question has to do with timing. So many of the calls I'm getting, the timing in which the bullying is addressed, and I know part of it has to do with an investigation, is a while before something happens. And maybe Board Chair Lolita Walker is saying said the same thing. So how do we start ensuring that, something happened between two students? We're still investigating to see whether it falls under bullying. But what can be done both with the person who was offended and the person who was allegedly the offender, so that both can still continue to come to school? Because I find that there's a disruption in the educational process while this investigation is taking place. And at times, sometimes 2 to 3 weeks, where they can't go back, the child is not going to school because they said they're still investigating and I don't want to go back. My child doesn't feel safe. And they're not in the school setting. Are they getting work to do at home? Yeah, but we would prefer the child to be in the school setting. So my question is twofold. What is it we as a board can do? Is it that more staffing is needed, and at what point? And I know the budget is slim, but what can be done? Because when this happens, we definitely want it to be dealt with head on.
Sure. Well, when I think about timing, according to our administrative procedure, schools have 2 days to begin the investigation and 5 days to close out the investigation. So to hear you mention 3 weeks that a child has been out of school, that kind of causes pause even for me, because that is definitely a moment where we're not being compliant. So that's a bigger issue if that's the case.
So granted, that's just the calls that I'm getting. I'm wondering, are there some things we can put in place to ensure that this is happening? Is it a staffing issue, or are there some things we should consider as we are putting in the budget to consider, whether it's your office or at the school level, so that these are processed in a more timely manner and children are brought back to school?
Absolutely, yes. Currently, Mr. Moody, myself, and we have a second assignment staff member that oversees this work of bullying. So if we did have someone where they, in addition to other, assignments, so if we had staffing, someone, office or a staff member where their focus was purely on bullying, the data collection, the compliance piece, the timeliness of schools responding to the instances, that would definitely be helpful.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. I want to recognize myself if there are any other questions, unless Dr. Zipporah Miller, if you had any other questions for the group, or Vice Chair Walker or Dr. Juanita Miller. Okay.
Actually, I'm good, so thank you so much.
Okay. So I did just have a question about one peer-to-peer interventions. I know sometimes students receive information better when they can, have some coaching or some discussions with their peers. And I didn't hear that in the plan, but is that a part of any of the interventions that exist?
I'm gonna let Mr. Moody respond to that because we do have a practice as it pertains to peer mediation, but not necessarily bullying. So Mr. Moody, would you like
Yeah.
to respond?
So I can speak a little bit to that. I think it might be a really good idea if there were some sort of peer-to-peer intervention in place. The students were maybe trained somehow to help the student that was bullied out or the student that is the offender. But we do have peer mediation in the county. But best practices does not suggest peer mediation as a solution to a documented and substantiated bullying situation. We do have peer mediation if it's really, like Dr. Holly was saying earlier, if an investigation is done or if it's determined there's been some intervention by an adult and we realize now that, wow, this is not bullying, but it really is a conflict between these two individuals, that can be mediated, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was just curious if there were any things there, research-based or evidence-based approaches to support. And this might be more so with the facilitator, like discussions that could exist where students could talk in more proactive measures. So before something happens, it's like you can talk about scenarios or different things. If that's not like a best practice, then I don't think it's something that necessarily is worth delving into, but I was just curious if that existed. And then the other thing was I wanted to get to Dr. Zipporah Miller's question because I was just thinking about an incident that's occurred, and this wasn't necessarily in PTCPS, but the reintegration piece. So once students go through their plan, they have, the different individuals that are tracking their progress, they have a reintegration back into the school. Is that like so if they were suspended or they were something like that, then they have to first have that final meeting before they can come back? And could that, does that in any way delay them being able to come back into school? Which is
No,
curious.
it doesn't. It's just like their first, say a student gets 2 days as a result of the incident. So on that, when the day that they return, then the counselor or the mental health clinician will meet with that student to just go over, review the expectations. And then one other thing is that in accordance with our AP, it states that 10 days afterwards, then there's another check-in with that student to just see how they're doing, how they are being in alignment with their plan. So it doesn't delay. It's just the next day that they return from suspension. That's when that meeting is held.
Thank you so much. And to maybe wrap up that, I'm not sure if you had a question, Mr. Moody, in response to what I was asking or something separate.
No, I wanted to add on to maybe add something additional to my response. We did roll out this year an SEL program in all of our middle schools called Second Step. And Second Step would give students an opportunity with an adult in the room to actually have conversations around bullying, harassment, mindsets, and that's going to be done during this year, grades 6, 7, and 8.
Oh, that's great. Okay, got it. So that is the proactive measure. I appreciate that. That's really helpful.
That's one.
Okay. Yeah, SEL is such a huge part. Social emotional learning, for those who are like, what's SEL, is a huge thing. So I'm really glad they were doing things around that. So I'm gonna turn to Dr. Zipporah Miller to maybe take us on.
I apologize. I thought I had finished, but one thing came to mind in terms of interventions. I know we cannot mandate the parents, but could in the AP include some resources for the child? And I know they would be customized based upon whatever happened in terms of the bullying, but so that the parent also can work with the child when they get home as a home school effort in trying to change the behavior of the child. Because many times, whether it's the one who's been offended or the one who was the offender, the parent may just not know what to do, and so you'll give some counseling and probably practices that the child can engage in, but how can this parent help reinforce to change that behavior as well when they're at home? If you see this, here's how you have them count to 10 or have them do this. Now, we can't enforce it, but just giving them some ideas of some things they can do so they don't feel helpless.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I know one of the elements of the Bullying Advisory Council, as I mentioned before, is in the area of restoration. So that's definitely something that we can look into, best practices, what's happening in other counties, to be able to provide effective research-based strategies to be able to support and empower our parents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Miller. Thanks so much, Dr. Holly. And my last question for you, and I think we maybe moving forward, but it's just around ACEs, adverse childhood events, and if there are any things that happen there with students. And the reason why I ask that question is because I know sometimes bullying is a reactionary behavior to things that are happening outside of the school. And sometimes, like, you can address as best you want, like what's happening with the child, but they have to go back home to whatever that may be. Are you addressing any kind of that, like outside of classroom trauma or events, or is there any tracking of students who may be having traumatic events in their lives that are connected to bullying in any way?
Got it. Yeah, that's where the SIT, FBA, the BIP, and the mental health clinician comes in. So those that where it's seriously, it's continuously, it's egregious, then that's when you begin to explore and bring in the mental health clinician or the school psychologist to provide those supports.
Great. I heard when you said SIT, I was like, I'm sure that's probably it. So I appreciate that. That's really helpful. Okay, well, so if there are no other questions, colleagues, should this policy be advanced for discussion? And I'm going to say, if you object, say aye. Otherwise, we'll just, if you're silent, then that means that you agree that this should be advanced for discussion. And Dr. Juanita Miller, I see you got a lot going on, so I just want to make sure that you're not trying to say anything. Okay, great. All right, so Ms. Welsh, please take under advisement that the Policy and Governance Committee will bring Policy 5143 back for discussion. Dr.
So I wanted to share a couple things. One is that actually the policy and the administrative procedure is based on Maryland's model policy for bullying, and so we actually are required by law to meet certain requirements that are and the policy is pretty much shaped after what was required in the model policy as well as the administrative procedure. So I don't know if there is a lot of room for change. I mean, certainly you can, like where in the administrative procedure, it says may invite the parent. Certainly the school system will say will invite the parent. That's, they can go a little bit more in that direction. But many of the components that sit in the policy and the administrative procedure are based on the model policy, which we are required. And I don't know, Dr. Hawley, if your division or department has to send that up to MSDE for review. I know sometimes the state wants to look at our policies.
I know that we would send it for the Board of Education's review. As far as MSDE, I'm not sure.
Okay. And the other thing I did want to point out is that the policy actually says on page 5 that the board of and hereby directs and back when this was written, it was the chief executive officer to update the administrative procedure addressing bullying and to provide information to parents. Then it says at the Board of Education's first meeting in January of each year, the chief executive officer shall provide to the Board of Education a summary report of bullying, harassment, intimidation reporting forms that were filed in the previous year to assist the Board of Education in complying with reporting requirements of the Maryland Code for the Education Article 7-424. So I don't know if that has occurred, but that is a requirement of this policy.
Because
back in near the end.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I know in November we submitted our report to MSDE, and that's also signed by our superintendent. So I believe he has that report, but I could definitely double check to make sure that he has it.
Okay, because I think this was very specific for the board to have the opportunity to review the summary report and the number of bullying reports that were made in the previous year.
Will do.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Mrs. Welsh. Dr. Zipporah Miller.
Chair Briggs, that being said, could I don't know what process that needs to be followed since it's coming from your committee. Have the superintendent, is there a way that we could have him present that information? Because that would be very helpful for us to have it. And since it says in the administrative procedure, or our policy says that we need to see it every January, that would be something that we definitely would want to have brought before us annually.
Yeah. So
not sure.
Cindy and Mrs. Welsh, if you, Cindy, could take note on that, we can follow up with the superintendent and his team, and Dr. Holly, who sounds like may have at least some access to some of that data around next steps, and then scheduling for when we can have a presentation on that. That would probably be the likely next step for this. And so we're not going to move it for further discussion right now. We'll hold it until we figure out what more we need to know based off of the data.
And it sounds like the report it's based on what Dr. Holly said, it sounds like the report is in existence. So it's a matter of the superintendent sharing it with the board, is what I'm thinking.
Yep, that's what I hear too.
Yes.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair, Ms. Welsh? I'm hearing that that the administrative procedure and the policy was modeled after the state of Maryland, but I'm also hearing that we are okay with making it more, I don't want to call it more aggressive, but just more, I'm going to say, in order to ensure that we address the challenges that the students are exhibiting by instead of saying may, say will, and mandate the parent to come as a part of the process, because that's just going above and beyond what they ask. Am I correct that that's something we can do, correct?
That is, yes, we absolutely can. As far as mandating that the parent comes, you can put that invitation out to the parent, but if the parent doesn't want to come, there's not very much that we can do as a system to get the parent to come into, unless Dr. Holly, you and your team have come up with something to get the parents in, but my experience has been that it's not very successful.
Right. And right now, we leave it, optional to the parent. We extend the invitation, and if both parents agree, then the meeting is held. If one parent objects, then that joint meeting, the individual meetings still happen, but that joint meeting would not happen.
So I just don't want our admin procedure to handicap us, because even if the joint meeting doesn't happen, the student who was allegedly the offender, the parent and the student need to come in and have some intervention that the parent is aware of. Am I making sense? So it's really important. And when you say may be invited, I think it kind of handicaps us. But when we give the administrator more authority to say, look, our policy says da 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 da, most likely the parent will come in. You're going to have the outliers who don't.
No, and that the language can absolutely be changed in the administrative procedure.
Right.
Yeah. And Cindy, if we can have the timer up when people are speaking, again, just for a sake, but I know you have your hand up, so I want to acknowledge it.
Oh yeah, just a quick question. So the report, are we bringing it back to the Policy and Governance Committee or to the board?
I think the report is for the board, and we'll work with the superintendent and his team and Dr. Holly and her team to align on the data and the scheduling.
So what are we taking to the board?
The board would be the report. So we would have the report for discussion, and the superintendent would let the board know when he's going to present. And then we'd also have access to the full report once that's released, and he's made aware of it. So I think that that's the answer. And then I was just going to say, Dr. Zipporah Miller, to your point, like around adding teeth to it, if it's also additional things that we can do that maybe aren't, if we're trying to like change outcomes, right? Maybe the policy isn't it. We can still say may versus shall, and people may still just do what they're going to do. But are there other supports we could offer the schools to kind of get to what you're trying to get, which is that we're encouraging parents? And what are those avenues? So maybe this is up for, I'm just saying the policy wise, this could be up for additional discussion. But we have a next step, an immediate next step, which is getting that data and aligning on a schedule to present to the full board. So we'll move forward if everyone feels good about that. This is off script, so the choice that we made, I'm hoping that Cindy, you take a dose of that so we all know what we're doing after this. Please and thank you. Okay, great. All right, well, Dr. Holly and Mr. Moody, thank you so much for joining. Obviously, you're clear on what our next steps are. We really appreciate you taking time out of your evening, and you don't need to feel obliged to stay if you need to. We get it.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to legislative updates. Item 3.1, MABE Legislative Committee Meeting Update. Mrs. Welsh, I'm going to defer to you for the majority of this, but I'll just share some highlights from what I saw during the meeting. So MABE had their most recent meeting on January 22nd. And there were a few things that came up as discussion items. One, they talked about for the MABE legislative bills. There are some pieces in there around the governor not wanting any regressive taxes, which can make Maryland less competitive at a time when it's trying to do the opposite. They also talked about recognizing that we need community-based social services and other services for families and communities to really support them. And I think you may have seen that the governor released a pretty aggressive plan to address poverty in the state recently. And so this kind of aligns well with that. And then as far as MABE Blueprint and maintenance of effort, which is making sure that the funding stays consistent post-pandemic. We have student-centered apprenticeship programs. The Maryland State Educators Association also promotes a bill focused on paraprofessionals and supporting that pursuit of a teaching certificate. There were discussions around educator immunity of those involved in altercations, such as assaults on educators, students attacking educators. And that's a bill that is before the General Assembly, which we have a position on. I'm sure that Mrs. Welsh can share more about that. And then also there are some discussions around seatbelts for electric school buses that have been against mandates. There have been some discussions around retrofitting school buses that already exist with seatbelts. And then any new school buses that are created, these are electric school buses, them having these seatbelts installed. And there are some different positions that MABE has around that. For example, if a bus was to get in an accident, younger students could be in more danger with the seatbelts than if not having them. So they have stances on that. And then there are some other pieces. I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but if you want to know more, we have our bill tracker and we can share all of those stances as well as where PGCPS is, whether they oppose it, whether they support it. So those are some of the highlights from the discussion that we had with MABE. Mrs. Welsh, I'll turn to you if you have any additional pieces around that MABE discussion.
Unfortunately, I was only at the first half hour of the MABE meeting because I had dental surgery that day.
Oh.
So you actually captured, I had just heard the beginning parts when they were talking about the budget, the governor's budget, because he had presented it. So you know, as far as I know, you captured everything that they discussed that day.
Yeah, well, let's I'll say I captured a portion of it, but again, if there are pieces that I didn't mention, and we have all of those bills available, and we'll be sharing that with the board and keep you in the loop as the legislative session continues. So we're going to move to item 3.2, Blueprint Implementation Update. I don't have any updates to provide to the committee about the Blueprint implementation. Mrs. Welsh, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Not at this point. I know that MABE is planning to present a bill that would, in terms of blueprint funding, would give the school systems the ability for the foundation funding that as piece of the blueprint funding, that instead of putting that 75% requirement that goes to schools, that they would lift that 75% just for the foundation funding. And the reason being is to allow the school system have flexibility in using those funds for wherever they may have a need. You know, because sometimes, you know, things come up for school systems that they really do need to be able to put funding towards whatever it might be as it relates to requirements with the blueprint. And then the other piece of that they have talked about presenting would be the adding an inflation factor to the maintenance of effort. But I have not seen that bill yet come out, but I know they have discussed this.
Yes. That is correct. And I actually lied. I think I just wanted to share one thing with board members, and that is that we shared MABE's stance on their funding request for the blueprint. And that was around kind of establishing, as Mrs. Welsh said, the maintenance of effort escalator to require increased local funding in certain jurisdictions. I shared this with all of you all. Adding in inflation adjustments to the minimum maintenance of effort amount of local funding, removing foundation program funding from the 75%, which Mrs. Welsh just mentioned, school-based funding allocation requirement, adding a population density-based adjustment to state funding for certain jurisdictions, and requiring state and local government cost sharing for the salaries of local blueprint implementation coordinators. And a lot of this is important. As the board knows, we've been having discussions about phase 2 blueprint funding and some discussions with county council. So I think just keeping a close eye on all of this and our advocacy and what we're sending to the Prince George's County delegation. We are doing that as a committee, but want to make you aware that advocacy is really important, and you should stay tuned on all of those updates. And then lastly, we have item 3.3, legislative update. And so this one, I'm going to turn to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with legislative updates.
So we have been tracking certain bills that have come through, and especially as hearings are coming up. And at this point, the bills that we have that we do support, that at least the administration supports, we're sharing the position from that standpoint, is a bill on community school alterations. No, I'm sorry, we haven't made a statement on this one yet. But the county boards, the bid advertisement threshold electronic posting, excuse me, which is House Bill 291, and we do support it because we already do it. So whenever we have when we're advertising a bid, we have we do the newspaper, but we also do all electronic posting, so we meet those requirements. And then we also have the public school, another bill that is of interest to us is House Bill 25, Public Schools Sexually Explicit Materials Prohibited in Libraries and Media Center. We do oppose that bill, and the reason we oppose it, first and foremost, is we actually have an administrative procedure, which, first of all, we don't have any of those items in our libraries in the schools. That's the first thing. I did talk to the supervisor of media, and they're not allowed. But the decision-making in terms of saying they're not allowed is made up of community members and staff members. And as a committee, they review items that people are proposing to put into the libraries. And so we as a system don't feel that we want legislators mandating certain things when we have really empowered our community and our staff members working together collaboratively to make decisions about what's in our public libraries. And if anyone has a question, don't hesitate to ask me. Then the other one that we support, there's another one, it's the Holocaust Education Assistance Grant Program, House Bill 71. That bill actually talks about, so we do have curriculum that addresses the Holocaust, and it's in middle school and high school. It's in our geography, world cultures, history classes. And the bill itself provides would provide a $50,000 grant to each of the school systems to both like update your curriculum, update your resources, provide professional development for the teachers. So that would be very beneficial for us. So we do support that. The teacher degree apprenticeship bill, which is House Bill 116. That's another bill that we support. It is talking about developing a grant program for where a school system would work together with other organizations and possibly with other school systems, as well as like with the unions and everything, and come up with a plan. They would be the sponsor for coming up with an apprenticeship program, which we already do a lot of work like in CTE with different apprenticeship programs, because the blueprint actually has a requirement for that. So we're already required to do it. But this bill, if we were to pursue, there's a grant that goes with each of the school systems that want to be a sponsor to this program, and it provides a good amount of money that would be supportive to help us, since we're already doing those kinds of things. So we felt that that was a was a good one to do. The one on financial literacy curriculum, House Bill 138, we do oppose that mainly because our platform says we don't think the legislature should be dictating curriculum. That's not the job of the legislature. That's the job of the Maryland State Department of Education. We actually have I require 0.5 credits though in financial literacy to graduate. And we already have curriculum that addresses financial literacy. I'm just off the top of my head, actually putting together anything I can see right here. And I will say that for the future, I will be glad to come in with a report that we can even post that would have a little bit of description about each bill. And that might be more helpful for everyone. I'll be glad to do that. Another bill that we oppose is House Bill 213, which has to do with Maryland's STEM program. And again, it's because the legislature is involved with curriculum, and then we do oppose the legislature being involved with that. And I'm just thinking, there's a local bill, Prince George's County Early Childhood Education Program and High School Child Care Centers. With House Bill 395, it's PG 504-24. We do oppose that bill. It would require that every high school would have both a CTE program for child development as well as for having child care centers in place. And the cost to be able to do something like that is astronomical, as well as and it's about actually providing services for pregnant or parenting students. Our data shows that I want to say that last year there was something like 70 students that were pregnant, in the year before maybe 77. So our numbers, first of all, are not, it's not like we would need that for every single high school. And so our academics division is adamant that they had tried that once before, and the cost was astronomical, and it really didn't meet the needs of what needed to happen because the students weren't there to provide services. So we are opposing that. And I think at this point, these are bills that have just come in. The rest of the bills are just coming in. Every day we get from the Department of Legislative Services a request to complete a fiscal impact statement and operational statement. And so we do depend on the divisions to complete that information because they're the ones that know best what the impact is for them. Now, saying that, when we read, this is Shelby McRae, who is works in my office as administrator for government relations. She and myself, we read these bills all the time. And certainly if we see a bill that is already, we know from the platform that the board has voted and said, no, we oppose this behavior or we support this behavior, then of course that's the position that we would take on a particular bill. So I think for right now, the rest are new bills that are just coming to us. I don't have information per se, but in our next meeting, I'll have something prepared that I can actually have it in writing and share it with you.
Mrs. Well. Oh, yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I have a hard time putting my hand thing up, so.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate you sharing that because then you can just put your hand up and I will recognize you, which I just saw. And just want to say thank you so much, Mrs. Welsh. And this may be a question that's about to come to you from Dr. Miller. So, and I also know that Board Member Boozer Struthers here. So just wanted to see if you could quickly speak to, if you have it on your radar, HB 398. This is the PGC sales and use tax on telecommunications. It's HB 0398. Not sure. I know that this is a pretty recent bill. It just came in like within the last day, so you may not have that.
Well, it's on the agenda for the legislators to review. So we need to. Well, I'll let you tell them, Robin.
Well, there's the bill itself. There's two bills. There's the telecommunications bill, and then that's a tax for telecommunications, and then the bill that is the tax for energy is an energy tax bill. And the bill that's been proposed is actually to repeal this bill that's currently in place. And what that particular bill says is that the bills say is that the money that comes into the county, that what a certain proportion or whatever, is actually goes to the school system for operational costs. And this is over and above maintenance of effort. So we would normally receive our maintenance of effort costs. And then on top of that, we would receive, and I think Lisa Howe had shared previously that we were looking at, we have this in our platform, $63 million, I think she had projected that what we get from both of those bills. So those, so I am familiar with the bills, yes.
Okay, great. Dr. Miller, Dr. Waddy Miller.
Okay, I want to piggyback on what Ms. Welch, the bills, the energy, and the telecommunications. I don't know whether you've had a chance to read the letter that the superintendent sent to all the board members. I think he sent it to all the board members in reference to giving options. It appears he's given options, whereas this committee voted out to the full board to oppose the tax that the repeal of the telecommunications and energy tax. And in his letter, he's indicating that we could do one or the other, but both of them would have negative effects. And I think we need to address that because it appears that the superintendent is proposing something that is contrary to what this board voted on. And it was a board action.
And Robin, for context, so this is the I believe the 27 million that that was recommended by OMB, the county's OMB, for the board to pay from their operating budget. The superintendent sent an email to board members last week saying that they had negotiated something, and now because of that telecommunications bill, he made a recommendation that there may be some conflicts there, and using the operating budget may be more advantageous for us. So just wanted to give that context. And if you feel that it's right to speak to it right now, then we can do it. But if you feel like that's something that we can do offline, then we can do that as well.
I really think it's you as board members have to have that conversation with the superintendent. It's not my position to be saying that. I can only tell you what you have in your platform and tell you what the bill says. But as far as your communications back and forth, that is something that I think you and the superintendent, the board members and the superintendent need to discuss.
Okay. Dr. Juanita Miller, it's here.
I agree with Ms. Welch. That is something that we as board members need to discuss because it does appear that what he is indicated in today's letter, you made reference to a letter last week. I'm making reference to a letter he sent to us at 1:32 p.m. today. And it was different from the letter from last week. And we do need to have some discussion because legislators have been calling, asking where are we and who's going to be testifying on behalf of that bill.
Yes, absolutely agree with that. And I don't want to, so I want to make sure you're not done because you've got 10 seconds of time.
Who, me?
Yeah. I think you're done. So I want to make sure I don't move to Vice Chair Walker before you're done.
I apologize. Oh, I didn't understand what you meant. Okay, yes, I'm through.
Okay, great. All right, Vice Chair Walker.
Hi, and thank you so much. Yes, I won't repeat what was just said. I do absolutely agree that this is a board discussion. So thank you for that perspective. One of the things I did want to note, and I had an opportunity to quickly touch base with the chair of this committee, Mr. Briggs, before, is, and I know that he'll be rolling it out, and is just to ensure that we have a plan by way of our policy and governance committee, that we have a link to understand how fast paced the 90 days are, and recognizing that we are getting calls. A number of us are individually getting calls from a number of legislators. What is our ongoing process specifically for these 90 days to ensure not only that our tracker is updated, which I know it is, but that Robin is the key source right there, as well as Shelby, and making sure that we can know what we're supporting, what we're not, and for bills that come up that we might not know about that didn't directly touch education on our original tracker, that we could get that information very quickly back. Where are we and what is our position? So I just wanted to make that known too for those looking onward, and to Dr. Miller, who I haven't had an opportunity to touch base with. But Mr. Briggs, I know if you wanted to follow up on anything in that nature, to make sure that we're communicative and that we're partners and we're very clear on our communication.
Yeah, and Robin, I let Vice Chair Walker know that you release a schedule weekly, and so you and Ms. McRae release a schedule with all the bills that are going to be up for discussion this week, and that we'll, moving forward, make sure that board members have access to that as well, and that we're sending that to the committee chairs for the various committees in the General Assembly. Because I think, to Vice Chair Walker's point, folks are reaching out and they don't know, is anyone showing up or what's happening? I think that'll help us to be more coordinated. So that's kind of the internal workings, which I'm sure we'll talk about more tomorrow during our meeting, but just wanted to flag that for you, that we already have processes in place. This will just be added to that process.
Okay, thank you. And then for my my little bit of time that I have left, I just wanted to, because I think that this will be either watched back or people are watching now, I just wanted to say, like, we are amazingly still committed to what we presented at the legislative day, as well as the partnerships that we have with our legislators, because we recognize, real talk, that they are standing at the front lines to support us in our endeavors that they are able to do for us. And we also need to be able to show up and support them in our endeavors too. So thank you so much for the conversation, Mr. Briggs, and the plan that you have going forward that will quickly execute. And thank you, Ms. Welsh.
And Robin, I want to defer to you if you had anything to share.
I think it's important for especially this committee to be informed about what's happening with the bills as they come in. Because the board has a responsibility. I mean, you went through the trouble to have a platform, and you do have a position about many aspects of bills that are coming through that is certainly, and the board also knows what's most important to them too. So I feel strongly the board absolutely should be informed so that they can take whatever action they think is needed.
Okay. And I want to recognize board member Pamela Boozer-Strother, who is here, and sorry for not recognizing you when you entered the room, and also want to turn it over to you for questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chair Briggs, and thank you to Ms. Welch and everyone working so hard on the legislative work. As Vice Chair Walker noted, this fast-moving cycle where we're all sometimes feel like we're scrambling to keep up. The one thing I did just want to note, and it's more of a global statement, is that I'm using the example of the bill from Delegate Taveras around the CTE and child care centers, and the intention to support a population and work with the school system on possibly an identified gap. And this isn't the only bill from this session that I think I've seen that with from our own delegation, that there's a mismatch of information, and we need to fix this. Like, we talk to a lot of these delegates and senators all the time. They're our partners in the community, but when it comes to legislative writing, we get surprises. And I don't know how we fix this, but just again, using Delegate Taveras' bill as an example, that could have been a very helpful bill if everyone had worked together on it to fill the gap that she has perceived, the need that she has perceived. And we certainly know that, we do have some gaps for this population, and daycare centers in our high schools available to students and employees. And with students, there may be 70 enrolled, but we know that there could be many more parenting students who are not enrolled, because we see what's happening in our high school populations as the grade levels drop from 1,000 in ninth grade in smaller and smaller classes. So let's be honest, some of our students are leaving because they're parenting. So what I'm seeking from us as a board and committee is getting this step better and right, and I will commit to that work again. But I just want to be on the lookout for this very important piece of what's happening. And then I'm grateful to my colleagues and Dr. Juanita Miller for raising the telecom bill, because we need to fully understand the revenues that have been coming in for years and years and could come into the future if that a repeal would impact. So I look forward to those conversations as well. Thank you so much for giving me the time, Chair Briggs.
Good. Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me lower my hand. As Board Member Boozer Strother did say, it sparked me into the part of the conversation that I know that Mr. Briggs is going to have offline tomorrow to solidify and then come to the board with, is this notion of there being these bills that don't necessarily hit our docket for education per se, but even though they're written and they're in session now, there is an opportunity to partner to garner language around there that could be supported and not opposed. And if that is the case, and people are reaching out to us, as the example that Board Member Boozer Strother said, then there'll be something in place for us to be able to have some input to what that looks like based on what our priorities are and how that could be I think process at least the partnership of communication up front. And I do think that's important because we've worked so very hard, our entire board, our administration, in order to ensure that partnerships happen, and we've created those. Therefore, the open communication this session and in the future needs to make sure it's happening. In a conversation I had with Mr. Briggs today, it sounds very fruitful that he has a process in place to be able to work tomorrow to solidify and then roll out to us, so that we can, these 90 days are going to be quick and fast. And with each of us talking to our own respective delegates and our own relationships formed, we just need to make sure that we are being supportive to them, because it is a fine line. And I think that we have the opportunity to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Welsh, I think you can probably speak to this, and I don't want to belabor the points. I think we're getting a good amount of time about this. But I did want to just say that I mentioned to Vice Chair Walker that, and you already know this, which is that like many of the delegates and state senators are crafting their bill language, their bill text, in September and October, right? They're reintroducing bills that they introduced in the previous General Assembly. And so none of this is new. And I think to Board Member Boozer Strother's point is maybe we can take more proactive measures then
in the future,
shape and craft like the language so that we don't get surprises, because a lot of those bills are filed, but they were like, they were crafted in the fall. And so I think that's like a measure we can have on the front end. And then if there's anything that's surprising on the back end, then it won't be like a long stream of bills. We'll have an idea of what those things are.
I think that's a great idea, to be more proactive and be able to have influence on the bills before they even get filed. I think that would be great.
Yeah, that'll help us so we're not like running around with like it's a fire. Not that we are, but it can happen because it's like a very so. Okay, well, with that being said, we're gonna move on. If there are no other discussions about this, we're gonna move on to 4.0 items for discussion. There are 8 policies for discussion. Colleagues, due to the number of policies for discussion this evening, we will have 3 minutes for the first round and 2 minutes for the second round. So we're gonna move to 4.1, revised school year 2023-2024 work plan. Colleagues, just want to make you aware to please take note that an additional meeting has been added to the work plan for April 30th, 2024. And this comes as a result of the January 16 meeting being canceled due to the school closure and inclement weather. So with this added meeting, the committee will be able to adhere to its schedule for the school year. So we'll start off with our first policy, which is 4.2, intellectual property rights. I'll yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on the new policy, intellectual property rights. Mrs. Welsh.
Okay. So this is just as Board Member Briggs said, as a brand new policy that was requested by Board Member Fields when he was the chair of this committee in the beginning of the year. And so we are now addressing this. And basically what it does is it really acknowledges the importance of protecting the rights of creators of intellectual property and the responsibility to ensure that copyright materials are used in compliance with federal copyright laws. Just as an aside, it's pretty serious. It's a major liability for the school system, a very serious violation. And when there is a violation of copyright law, and it can end up it can cost the system a tremendous amount of money if we are not vigilant and that we don't pay close attention to what is required of us. So the purpose of the policy is to make sure that the appropriate use of copyright materials are that there's an expectation and our employees are using the appropriate use. And something happened here that we lost the line. Can you slide down to the next one? I think it stopped right there. I don't know why I put that there. So just put a period. That must have been a typo. And then we go in the definitions, and it does, I have included the definition for copyright law for employee, which I have for this policy. I've included everyone, as well as in this instance, I have also included our independent contractors, vendors, and the employees of contractors and vendors, because even in a situation, let's say that we had an employee of a contractor who violated copyright law, and the company that was responsible for that, made the material or whatever, could actually sue the school system. And yes, it was one of our contractors, but it would probably that part of that liability would fall on us, and we might be considered the deep pocket in a situation like that. So I wanted to include our contractors also. And then it just explains what intellectual property is. It could be things like original literary, artistic, dramatic, musical works. It can also be like trademark things, like the when we have Prince George's County logo, we used to have, what was it, Great by Choice or something, and that ended up being a copyright infringement. We had to take it off because that was somewhere else that had already been copyrighted. So we had to do it. So that's important. It describes also student work product, which I think is important. Would you scroll down, Cindy? And that is the that includes any of like students' written reports, essays, tests, homework, personal class notes, art projects, computer software. And then if you go a little bit further down, there's a definition for work made for hire, which is for an employee that works within their scope of, and they develop different things, that it's really, it's work for hire. So the school system owns those things that the employee has developed while they were on the job. So then if you move down, there's a whole section that discusses copyright. And the fact that the system might have certain licenses that allow us to use copyright materials, but with absent a copyright license, employees and students should assume that all copyright instructions apply, and that they are not making loads of copies or using the material. Keep scrolling, Cindy. Without permission to use the copyright materials. And so it is the responsibility of the employees and students to understand those limitations. And then the employees are expected to be knowledgeable about the standards set in this policy. I do want to point out that we already have a pretty in-depth administrative procedure that addresses copyright. It goes into great detail, as well as we have a Safe Schools video, which also goes in great detail about all the copyright requirements. And that is a mandatory training of all our employees and our contractors and everything, so that everyone is informed about what their responsibilities are. Then the next thing, if you go down to, is fair use. And this is a judicial doctrine, that acts as a limitation on exclusive rights of copyright owners, and provides that reproductions of copyright work may be deemed fair use when the purpose is either criticism, comment, news reporting, or teaching, including making multiple copies for classroom use. So that scholarship or research. So that's why it's important, the fair use doctrine, when it comes to teaching. Because the multiple copies can be made when the purpose and character of the use is of a commercial nature and as a nonprofit educational purpose. I'm sorry, I keep scrolling. I keep trying to scroll myself. and looking at what the nature of the copyrighted material might be, and then of course the amount and how substantial of the portion is that might be used that was copyrighted, and then the effect of the use of the copyrighted material on the potential market or value for the copyright material. So those are 4 factors that are weighed in making determinations of whether or not when someone has used material, whether or not falls under the fair use doctrine. The next area has to talk about technology, education, and copyright harmonization, which is the TEACH Act, again, another federal law that aims to balance the needs of educators and students engaged in remote or distance or online learning with the rights of the copyright owners. And this is important because we have been more involved in virtual instruction than we have ever in the past. And it will probably continue to do more of this. So this law is extremely important, and it's the act is actually covering all the materials that are used for remote or online use. Can you scroll down? Let's see, and it applies to when the performance or the display is part of the regular classroom instructional and accessible only to PGCPS students who are enrolled in a online or hybrid class course. So those are important criteria. And if you were to look at our AP, it goes into great detail to explain each one of these things and all the what the components are and what are required of our staff. So that's why I'm not going into great detail because we have it sitting in the administrative procedure. And then works made for hire. Basically, when an employee creates a work within the scope of employment, the board is the owner of any and all rights to such work. And unless there would be some type of written agreement to the contrary. And this goes the same with supplies, because the employees using usually supplies, equipment, material, time, paid time of the school system in order to be able to develop whatever they've developed. And usually what they've developed is part of their job responsibility. So that's why it does, it's still the board's property. And then if you go down to student work product, under Maryland law, the board cannot claim ownership rights, property rights, or the copyright to any student work product if the student's enrolled in PGCPS. And that's an important thing to know and to realize. And it says that parents of our students are to be provided with an annual notice that basically informs them that we are not allowed to use their the students' intellectual property in any PGCPS external media publications, reproductions, or display. And then the other thing is that I included that in order to appropriately, this goes to contractors and or vendors, that in order to appropriately safeguard intellectual property rights, provisions for intellectual property shall be included in agreements, contracts, and memorandum of understanding with contractors, vendors, and other entities that provide services and products to PGCPS. So that will be an important thing that needs to be included in the contract agreements. And then the next thing is it says the superintendent is authorized to develop an administrative procedure to address this policy. And that's about it in a nutshell.
Thanks so much, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. And I will recognize hands in the order that they're raised. Okay. All right, I'm seeing no hands, no comments. The only comment that I would like to make, Mrs. Welsh, is artificial intelligence. I know that as we all kind of collectively get more aware around its uses and what it'll look like in the school system, I know that it draws from a lot of different places, and that could potentially be a cause for intellectual property violation, whether it's a teacher or someone else. I don't think that's like a huge thing for right now, but just wanted to flag it. I know that the New York Times is like supposedly suing, I think, AI or ChatGPT, whatever it is, for pulling some of their things. So there's probably more legal, precedent that's going to be set around this. But for now, if there's anything around AI,
So we actually included a provision in the artificial intelligence policy that addresses that also. So
Oh, great.
we did pick it up. But we did also include in that policy that we would review it once a year, only because AI is so new and it's not always changing. So that, you know, as we get more and more involved, we'll find out more and more things. So we, you know, there's certain areas we might want to actually expound on more with that policy down the road. I should also point out that there is right now a draft policy on artificial intelligence that's floating around. It hasn't been filed yet, but it's out there and will probably be filed in the very near future. It'll be a curious thing to see where that proceeds or whatever. So, and what it actually looks like when it finally does get filed. So,
Okay, well, that's also something to be aware of.
yes.
Any other questions? Vice Chair Walker.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Welsh, as you just said that, it made me think if we already, assuming we might know who the filer or one of the filers are, that is something we could be proactive on and take a look at what the proposed bill says or where their direction is, just in case there's something that we can't even add in by way of the policy that we've just put together. So if we could do that, I think that would be ideal. If you, I say we, I mean you, but if you could jump in front of that one, I think that that would be an amazing thing for proactiveness. Thank you.
And just so you know, I did because I did receive a copy of this through people I know that, I mean, I don't know who, I'm trying to see if I can tell who even put this to get. Senator Hester is the person who put this the bill, which hasn't been filed yet, together. But I did also send this over to Dr. Zuckerman, who, you know, our chief of IT, because it was his department who was very instrumental in helping us with the AI policy. I wanted him to get a handle on it as soon as possible to get his input when he reads through it. So but I have it on my pile of bills to read, but I'll put it on the top and go through it and bring it back to your attention, or let you know as soon as it gets filed.
Thank you. Even you sending that to Mr. Zuckerman is amazing, just so we can get in front of it. I think that's a perfect example. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks so much, Vice Chair Walker, and thanks so much, Mrs. Welsh. Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
I'd like to move that we advance this policy in lieu of what we talked about tonight.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the P&G committee on the new policy and bring it back for, I'm sorry, I may have lost track. We're bringing it back for further discussion at the next P&G meeting.
Are we? I thought would be for action.
No.
Right.
This was, I'm sorry. I should have been more clear. No, this is to move to action. We don't need.
Okay. No, it wasn't
We don't
you.
need
I think I like blanked out for a second. So we'll bring it. We'll move it for action. So
Yes.
thanks. Okay, moving on to 4.3 policy 0115 information technology services acceptable usage guidelines. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on the policy information technology services acceptable usage guidelines. Mrs. Welsh.
Yes. Cindy, do you mind putting it up, please? So this policy, we did have one that was in place, and much of it was actually taken out, and then the language was removed, because I actually again sent it to IT and said, since this is your area of expertise, and also because we had just gone through the cybersecurity issues and stuff, I felt it was really important for them to have input on this. So many of the things that are here were sent to me from Dr. Zuckerman and his staff. So let me go through and just share with you that the policy statement was expanded on to talk about the committed to providing safe, productive, and equitable learning environments for all students, staff, and guests. And then it talks about that in terms of our network infrastructure, including the wide area network and local area networks and the Wi-Fi network and a cloud-based networks, that they've been designed to support effective academic and business practice for the school system. And then that it is the expectation for all employees, students, and guests that they act in a responsible, civil, ethical, and appropriate manner when using our technology and digital tools, and that we do reserve the right to expressly to monitor and filter network traffic to ensure compliance with this acceptable use policy and to protect the safety and security of all users. And so basically the purpose of the policy is to support and inform users regarding the appropriate use of the technology and digital tools for any activities that have been sanctioned by PGCPS, and to ensure effective and safety, the network structure, and maintain safety and privacy of individuals. So there is overlap with this policy with the policy we just recently worked on, which had to do with safety and security for information technology. And you'll probably see some things within it that remind you of those things that we addressed earlier. So if you scroll down, then I have definitions for cyberbullying, because oftentimes that's one of the biggest concerns is what's happening with students and sometimes with employees in treating one another when they're on, on our network, on our computers, whatever. And then if you scroll down further, I do have a definition. There's reference throughout the policy. It talks about technology components, and that's referring to the network infrastructure, school technology resources, personal devices, data and information access and transmitted within the network. And then user, as I have included, is employees, all our employees, whether they're permanent or temporary substitute, and then our contractors, employees, vendors, and students, and then students enrolled in PGCPS. So then in terms of standards, this policy does apply to the following technology components. And this gives you a good idea of what's all considered in technology components. So it's the network infrastructure, the school technology resources, the personal devices, and then data and information access. And then if you scroll down further, there's a whole section on acceptable use and compliance. Users may use technology components only for the following purposes. So then it goes into the different areas. So one is education and academics, including research, teaching, learning activities, as well as communications with teachers and students. Then the second one is administrative and business functions related to school and district operations. And then communications authorized individuals for school system related objectives. And then accessing digital tools, research, and websites approved by PGCPS. Further, if you go down, there's also acceptable uses would be electronic student and personal records shall be kept confidential and secure, that all employees are responsible for following the policy and procedures addressing information security. So there it is, referencing back to the other policy that we recently worked on. And then if you scroll further down, and then all authorized technology will comply with the federal law on the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, and the Anti-Code of Maryland, and the Student Data Privacy Act. So it's really protecting all our students' data. And then as far as prohibited use of technology, users are prohibited from using our technology resources for any of the following purposes, and that would be accessing and transmitting illegal, harmful content, including pornography, hate speech, violence, gambling, and materials that are libelous, slanderous, and defamatory, downloading or installing unauthorized software, engaging in cyberbullying or harassment, violating copyright law or plagiarism information. If you scroll down further, engaging in activities that disrupt the network or compromise its security, accessing or transmitting personal information without authorization, using the network for personal gain or commercial purposes, engaging any activity that's prohibited by school rules, board policy, or PGCPS administrative procedures, and requesting or requiring employer applicant for employment to disclose any account credentials used for accessing personal social media account or service. So again, you can sort of see throughout this that it's really that this policy interrelates with numerous areas, like both with copyright, with also the information, technology, the security piece of it. And so how we use our technology within the school system, ensuring that we all meet all the acceptable use guidelines is extremely important. And then if you scroll down further in terms of accountability, it's been determined that a user has improperly used the equipment, the network, or the technology resources any manner, the user can expect disciplinary action. This actually was in the old policy. That may include, but not limited to, immediate suspension of equipment network access. And then if you proceed further, disciplinary action by school office administration in accordance with the Prince George's County Public School student and employee codes of conduct. And depending on the nature of the violation, it could even lead to arrest and prosecution. And then the last piece talks about that the board directs the superintendent to develop administrative procedures to implement this policy. And there currently are administrative procedures in terms of acceptable use. However, that they definitely, once this policy has been approved, those procedures will definitely need to be updated.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. I'll recognize hands in the order that they're raised. Seeing no hands, colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
I move that it be advanced.
Second. Okay. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 0125 and bring or advance it for action at the next PNG meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to move to 4.5, Policy 1500, Parent and Community Advisory Council. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on Policy 1500 PCAC.
Oh, PCAC. Oh, I thought not. Oh, I have non-discrimination as the next one.
Sorry. Yes. So we're
Sorry.
now at, thank you. No, thanks for the correction. We're at 4.4, Policy 0125, non-discrimination. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on Policy 0125, non-discrimination. Mrs. Welsh.
So this policy was a policy that I had presented to you a month ago. And it took the policy we currently have posted on the website, which was like maybe one paragraph that was very generic, and broke it out into many different areas so that you could, and there are many definitions so that you could look at it from an application standpoint, as well as prohibited employment discrimination and prohibited discrimination in education programs and activities, and then discrimination reports and complaints. And then, of course, the implementation requirements. And when I had presented it the last time, everyone asked the question if you all could have a month just to review it, because it was a massive change in there was a lot more language and massive change in what the current policy looks like, just so you had a chance to really spend some time reviewing it. So I'm really just open to your comments about any changes that you think need to be done to the policy.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments on any additional changes to Policy 0125, non-discrimination.
I move that we move it forward.
Okay, all right. So I have a action to move it forward for action, and I would second that unless there are any objections.
Second.
Okay, great. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 0125 and move it forward for action.
Okay.
All right, so now we are moving to 4.5, Policy 1500, Parent and Community Advisory Council. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an update on PCAC. Mrs. Welsh.
Okay. Cindy, will you post it for us, please? So these were conversations we had at the last meeting. If you no, not non-discrimination, this is PCAC now. Okay, there we go. So if you scroll down, if you get to definitions, okay, I now highlighted in this aqua color so we can see the change. I did add language in for a good standing. I had I put it in there. I actually put the word good standing, but never had the definition before. So a PCAC member is considered in good standing if they meet all of the membership requirements and attend the majority of the PCAC meetings. So I know there was no real conversation about the attendance of PCAC members. It was more about making sure that they were parents if they're representing a district. But I do know that that is a conversation, and Chairperson Briggs, if you feel differently, let me know. But I think that has been a conversation with PCAC in terms of ensuring that members of PCAC are attending the meetings. So that's the only reason I didn't put how many meetings they have to attend or how many they can lose, but I just felt like, because we didn't really have a conversation about that, but I felt like that it is important that they do attend the majority of the PCAC meetings. And I can certainly put something more specific if you think that's what needs to be there. The next one is parent, and that was a whole nother conversation in terms of the language to ensure that everyone's clear. This goes back to who can be a member of the PCAC if you're representing one of the districts. And I include a biological or adopted parent, legal guardian, or any individual acting as a parent in the absence of parent or guardian of a student enrolled in PGCPS. And then if you move further down, and that was a definition that we had previously. I think this definition, I had this information I had put in previously because that was a question to make sure liaisons are not voting members. And it was, the green one is from before. So then, okay, so then we have the one, I did add the language that each appointed member representing one of the non-elected Board of Education districts must be a parent or guardian as defined in the definitions of at least one student currently enrolled in the school system. In the event that the parent no longer satisfies the requirement of that definition, the seat will be vacated and a new representative must be appointed. I believe that is where we ended it when we met the last time, so that we're very clear that the parent, regardless, even if it's a parent of a 12th grader, they can be on the committee for that year their child's in 12th grade, but then the next year they cannot be on the committee. And then if you scroll down further, those were changes I made previously. So this was a change that Chairperson Briggs had requested, that the board office, with the cooperation of the liaison appointed by the superintendent, shall, and then it says develop, it has to do with the application process, which I believe that's what you had requested, Chairperson Briggs. If you're in agreement with that. If not, I'll change it however you want it. But those were the changes that I picked up from our video, listening to what everyone had said at the last meeting.
Great. Thank you so much, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Okay. Mrs. Welsh, I'm going to recognize myself really quickly and just say that first, thank you for making those changes to the policy. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I think the language was just from CEO superintendent, so that looks good to me. Otherwise, the policy said what it was already saying. The one thing that I didn't see, and I want to kind of continue to update this policy, is that there's like going to be literally a wave of PCAC members that their seats come to an end this term. I think we have like the 3 that we just got that are staying, but the remainder of all those districts and the community and nonprofit, et cetera, those seats are going to be vacated. And I think we talked about having staggered terms so that we can have we'll never have the majority leaving at one time. And I want to see if maybe we can get some language in there, but I didn't get any agreement from the committee the last time I presented that. So that's probably why that didn't get in there. But I do think having some type of a staggered term would help to make it. Yeah.
No, you're right. I didn't put anything in there because I heard conversations about cohorts, then I heard conversations about staggering, and you're right. The committee never did come to agreement on if they wanted to do that or not.
Yeah. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I think that's really more for colleagues, but if there's no objections to that, then I would love it if we could, by default, just move forward with some language, whatever. I'm amendable to cohorts or having staggered terms. It doesn't matter to me. I recognize Vice Chair Walker.
Hi, and thank you so much. Just give me 1 second. Hi, and thank you so much. I wanted to so the language around the language piece right there, I think that we will naturally have staggered just because of how they're coming in. So I remember talking about that, but I feel as though they're naturally going to be staggered. The other thing is that I wanted to make sure that we were clear. Did you say that 12th graders, I know we had that discussion. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear all of it. You did put in there the note about 12th grade parents are able to serve because they are parents, and that then they just will follow the regular rule that when you're not parents, you just don't sit on PCAC. Did you already say that?
So no, so I actually took the 12th grade language out because I thought that we had ended on the part where we were going to define what a parent was. And then if
Yes.
we met that definition, then you absolutely
Perfect.
could be a parent. But it does say in the event that the parent no longer satisfies the requirement of that definition, the seat will be vacated and new you know what, that's not going to work. Because the parent's still going to always meet the requirement. Now, as we're talking about this, will always meet the requirement of being the parent because they're still the parent. It's the issue that their child left school and is no longer in school.
Yeah, but it's the parent of a PGCPS. It's a parent of a PGCPS scholar. That's the
Oh,
language.
it is. That's correct. It's correct. You're
Yeah,
right.
so no worries, no worries. I think we tackle it. We don't have to specifically call out 12th grade. I think we tackled that one. Thank you for the memory. And then the other piece is if at this current time, all of the PCAC members leave at the same time, then I would agree that for continuity, that we do need to have someone that is staying. It could be the chair. I'm fine with that, Mr. Briggs, if that's what you were saying. I don't know that it needs to be all of them, but maybe, whoever's in leadership might be able to serve that continuity. And so maybe their term is 1 year longer. I would be agreeable to that. And then what's the last piece? I'm sorry. I'll come back as a second round for the last piece there. But I think that we have exhausted this particular this particular bill, and I would love to just move forward with the policy. And I'll just think of my other question in 1 second. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walker.
Yeah, no worries.
Member Boozer-Strother.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to comment, even though I'm not a committee member. I would support staggered terms if we could get that language in there and make this work, to make sure that there's always that there isn't the every 2-year cycle of a brand new group of parents, or that parents then, some may feel they should renew and continue to serve for longer, and then that seat doesn't revolve and get new voices in it, which I think is part of what the goal is here. The other thing is, I just want to note that it does seem when we restarted the PCAC, the intention seemed to be more of a advisory committee to the board, and the board was highly engaged in the selection process of those who would sit in the 9 seats, encouraging our constituents to apply and being part of that process. Whereas now it does seem to more heavily lean that this is an advisory committee to the administration. And so, and even the shift in how one of the 9, may be selected, like with the board member kind of having, final input. So I just wanted to ask the committee, is that your perception as well? Because that's what I'm seeing in this. So I guess it's a question to you, Chair Briggs, at this point, unless you want to open it up to others.
Yeah, I think there have been, at least in the past, differing perspectives, but and what I will say is, from context, and Ms. Welsh, feel free to chime in, but my understanding was based on the language that OGC has, and I think according to other school districts, our language is comparable to what they have. And that was what we had talked about initially. So I don't know that, but I also agree. I think the other perspective was from Chair Mickens-Murray, was that it really was a committee for the board. So I've been agnostic, but I think that it should be that, parents are giving perspectives to the board, to really help understand, because we have that community engagement piece to our role. to really kind of advocate on behalf of our districts and our community. So I think that it makes more sense that way, while still reporting to the, I mean, either way, we're doing the work of the people by, you know, making sure that our schools reflect and our community reflects the needs of the students and the staff. But I'll defer to Vice Chair Walker or Mrs. Welsh, others who may have opinions.
Oh, thank you. If you want to ask me the question again specifically, I'm happy to answer that. My hand was up for my second round, but I'm sorry, Ms. Boozer Struther, what did you say? I can answer anything that you ask of me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm just noting what I feel like as a board member is kind of an intention shift, and I think I agree with, you know, Chair Briggs, that I'm not arguing a position either way, you know, because I value these voices no matter if they're being addressed to the board or to the superintendent and administration or both. But the policy itself just does seem to have that shift. From my experience as a board member, one of the 9 elected seats from when we started this process, which was bringing PCAC online, you know, in a fully functioning entity again, which is the most important aspect of this.
Yes, I would absolutely agree. And then with that, I think your question, I didn't hear all of it, but I need to fill the seats. We have a number of remaining seats that need to be filled, and we are ready. Let's get this application process resent and let's close it out and get these people filled, because they have voices and they really want to do the work. We just really need to feed them. So any help you can provide on that, Ms. Boozer Struther, I'm happy to help on that end.
Great. And I want to recognize Mrs. Welch for additional comments.
So I wanted to let Board Member Boozer Struther know that I did get back and look at our policies from the past. And in 2013, the question had come up by the committee about, did the superintendent always was he here, the CEO, responsible for providing a recommendation on who should be the representative of the for each district? And that language actually came back from 2013. And then when we looked at this policy, which might have been, let's see, 21, we kept that language, and then we kept it again 22. So that piece has always been there. But I did recommend, and the language has changed a little bit, that instead of the superintendent just picking one person for each district, because Board Member Briggs had shared that usually there's numerous applicants, and that instead that the superintendent would actually pick, identify every one of the applicants who appear to be suitable to be a member of the committee. And that way, each board member for their district would have the opportunity to choose from those particular people that he had selected, so that it's not really the superintendent picking the representatives, but the board member gets to pick who is the representative from their district. And so that's why I put that language in to make sure that the board members have the opportunity to engage in the selection process, because I think how it was set up previously didn't provide that opportunity. I will say that the change in language that has to do with advisory to the board and to the superintendent, I think is in here somewhere. The board collectively advises the board and the superintendent. That previously the language used to be reports directly to the board. And I did see there were one policy in the state did talk about the board and the superintendent, but then there were 2 other policies that were more specific to the board. I will share that the chair of PCAC, and Board Member Briggs, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe she shared at the last PCAC meeting that she, I guess, I don't know if it's her and like the co-chair or whatever, are meeting monthly with the superintendent and the chief of staff. So I know there's a lot of communication, and I do know that certainly the superintendent wants to be involved, you know, with the engagement piece and the community. So, but I mean, we can do whatever it is that you think needs to be done to the policy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I want to just say, I think to Board Member Boozer Struther's point, though, because I think there is a lot of wisdom in as board members, not just thinking about the here and now, but we're thinking about like, you know, long term as administrations change. If ever there were a superintendent that had an agenda or a goal, you know, they're selecting people that they want in any of these things to kind of move forward, that there is kind of a consolidation of power that could exist. And so I do think that there should be some balance in ensuring that, you know, you offer that balance by making sure that board members do have that perspective of who's on that board. And I think it creates equity. So I do want to say that I think as we're thinking about this policy, we're not just thinking about the here and now, but also long term. Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you so much. I did get a note that Cindy, did you get my text message just now? The secondary one? I did get a note that Miss Millhouse is on the line. I know she's an attendee. She signed up to speak at the last one that was rescheduled due to snow. And so just wanted to see what needs to happen on that. And I'll let Cindy take care of that for that piece there while I just make my last statement. I don't know, Mr. Briggs, if you had anything there before I went forward.
No, thank you.
Okay, no worries. I just wanted to make sure Cindy had gotten that. The last piece I'll say on this right here, I don't know if we're leaning towards having to look at this again, but I feel like with all of the information that we've given to Ms. Welsh, I feel like we're in a really good spot to be able to pull forth the policy, and then we can still make revisions to the policy just so we can make sure that we're getting ourselves going on this. Thank you so much. And I think that you as the chair need to make the call on that. It sounds like from Ms. Adeline that Ms. Millhouse signed up to be a speaker at the last meeting. The meeting was canceled due to snow, and she didn't receive any follow-up by way of signing up today. So her hand was raised, I guess, in the background that only Cindy can see. We can't see it on our end. So I think you have to call from that. I'll pause so Cindy can let you know.
Okay, well, no, I want to say thank you, and I'm so sorry if that happened if you were watching Ms. Millhouse. And Cindy, I think what we can do is we can just do some additional outreach to her, just to close the loop there and make sure that we are able to.
No, she's here, Mr. Briggs.
Oh, she's in the room.
She's as an attendee right now. I think Miss Adeline is just waiting for your okay in order to grant her permission to come in just based on the circumstances. I think that's what is happening right now.
Yeah.
Miss Adeline, can you just confirm what the next steps are, please?
Yeah, so she did sign up for the last committee meeting, like we shared earlier, which was canceled due to the snow and school closure. However, she did not sign up for this meeting. But right now it's the call of the chair if he wants to recognize her, for her to present her public comment.
I mean, I do know we do have public comment at the beginning, and if she didn't sign up, I'm inclined to say that we should move forward. But if there's some reason I haven't received anything from Mrs. Millhouse that says that there's something additional to add, so I want to say I'm going to extend the offer to Mrs. Millhouse to share that additional comment with us with the Policy and Governance Committee. I think for the sake of time, because we have like 2 more bills to go through, that will proceed, and then we will review that and we'll get back to Mrs. Millhouse regarding her comments for this evening and apologize for any kind of technical issues that existed there. Board Member Boozer.
Yeah, I apologize. I wasn't here at the top of the meeting, but I did see the registered public comment for Dolores Millhouse and Shannon Reed are publicly listed on the agenda. So
okay. All right. Well, if it was on the agenda, I mean, she was registered for this evening, then that's different. And if for some reason we skipped, then I think that's a completely different thing. So if you see her name there, then I'm happy to go with having her come in and provide that comment if we overlooked her. Otherwise, if it was so is that the case, Cindy?
No, I think because what happened, I kind of just changed the date from the last meeting to this one, and I kind of missed to take her off board docs. So I'm just thinking, well, it's up to you, but to me,
I think the discussion, I think we have lots of advocacy that we'd like to hear her. So let's actually just have her enter and share her comment so that we can continue forward. Okay, so I'm gonna backtrack. We're still at policy 4.6 PCAC, but I'm going to go to the public comment section. and say that there is now one registered public comment speaker this evening, and that is Ms. Dolores Millhouse. And please be, we know the rules here, so I don't have them scripted, but comments need to be within the 2-minute time frame. And
It's 3 minutes.
3-minute time frame. And if there are any, concerns with language, then of course you'll be removed. I have to say all those parts. Apologies for not having the direct language. You didn't have any registered commenters here. So Mrs. Millhouse, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I want to say thank you all for the work that you all have done in really moving this policy forward and getting it revamped. One of the things I just want to touch bases on is when it was spoken about as it relates to in good standing. We have been very, I'm going to use the word blessed to have members who are definitely committed to the work of being an advisory group. And so luckily we have not had any issues with people not showing up and being present. I will also say that I am in agreement with you all moving forward, especially with adding to the policy, having the staggered positions. But right now at this point, the policy does not cover that. And so unless you all make some decision, all of the members of the PCAC would need to reapply or also allow individuals from the community to apply going into the next school year. As it relates to how balanced it is, as it relates to us advising, it looks more so leaning towards supporting or advising the advisor superintendent. We are here to advise the board and superintendent like the policy states. We are only asking that you all understand that our voice first represents the community, that we are here to give you insight. We don't report to or work for, but we make sure that we are providing an understanding from a perspective that you all may not have because of where you're sitting and what you're doing. So we are not heavily focused on just engaging with the superintendent. We are here to engage with the board as well as the superintendent. And I do believe the policy as it stands and the language that you have does state that very clearly. So thank you all for the work that you're doing. Let's move this forward for public comment. And the only thing that I always ask is that there's a policy in place that we follow it and don't circumvent it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dolores Millhouse. That concludes our public testimony. And so we are now going to jump back to item 4.5, which is policy 1500 PCAC. And I'll just say to Vice Chair Walker's point, as far as the decision for the policy, we have the 3 vacancies, I think, is District 1, District 4, and District 9. Well, they will be vacancies. We can actually make those a part of the staggered piece that's in the policy. So we have the District 2, District 3, and District 5. So it actually works out perfectly because that means that everyone that we bring on now would be able to stay. And then the folks that would be leaving would be the folks that are currently in their seats. And I'll also say that the selection process for those seats is not held up by the policy being under revision. So everything is still the way that the policy currently exists. Then it's not hampering us in any way from moving forward with the other really important work, which is getting those seats filled. So I think we can just kind of do our responsibility of making sure that we're making this policy as evergreen as we can make it, unless there are any additional pieces, and adding in that staggered language so that when we bring in those new folks, it'll just be a really kind of well done piece. And then I think our superintendent liaison and the board staff are working to fill the seats for Districts 1, District 4, and District 9, and she's getting back to the PCAC chair. So Mrs. Welsh, if you can take under advisement that we're going to just include those additional edits
Real quick.
Yep.
So yeah, just really quickly, our language right now, just correct me if I'm wrong, I think our language right now, even if they did come into office, wouldn't they end at the current term? We just should look at that because I don't think it's a forced stagger inside of the language as it is now. We just need to take a look at that right there. And if so, then I would be a proponent for having the chair have a longer term, just to ensure continuity. And maybe it's 2 people, chair and vice chair. I'm not sure how we want to do that, but just to have some type of continuity as new people are placed inside of the role. But yeah, for sure. the language now for sure, said that. Isn't our wonderful, Mr. Whitley on the line too? I think that, well, Ms. Welsh is a lawyer too. So I think that that's what our language reads right now. Ms. Welsh, can you correct me if I'm wrong? Because I could be wrong.
So it says each member of the PCAC shall serve for a term of 2 years. So I'm assuming once you get on PCAC, it doesn't matter that the first group, their term's ending, if you get in the middle of the year, you're gonna go for another 2 years because you have a term of 2 years. So
But don't they fill a vacancy of current state? Like the reason that the reason it's becoming vacant is because they don't qualify for the role current state. So wouldn't they be filling that until the end of the term and then running?
But they're still going through the same application process as you would be if you started off in the very beginning. And I would think that because we have language that says you're serving for a term of 2 years, that they would then stay for 2 years. They wouldn't just get on for like a half a year and then turn around and get back off. But I also want to point out, though, it does say here also, a member may not serve for more than 2 consecutive terms. So a member can stay on for 2 more years, and they can do 4 years, which then brings a question to mind. So how does that happen? If the member wants to stay on for 2 more years, because we don't have language in the policy that addresses this, do they submit another application? How is there a different process? How would you want to handle that?
I mean, I'm sorry, just to close out my thought before that one there. And like currently in our board seats, if somebody leaves for any reason, there is somebody appointed to the position. But I think what you're saying is because they go through a process, the application process is the trigger. So somewhere in there, let's just go ahead and add that, because it could be looked at, as I was saying too, which I'm fine with you saying that, hey, the application, if somebody puts in an application, then that's the trigger to their new term. They're not fulfilling a term that's currently vacant, and that's absolutely fine. All right, thank you.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I
you
think
said, I'm sorry, you said, let's go ahead and add that. What did you want me to add?
Yeah, so when I originally asked the question, I was under the assumption from reading the policy, my assumption was that when these people apply, then they would be filling a term of somebody that no longer is seated because they don't fit the criteria that we have in our own policy. If that's the case, then their term would therefore end at the end of this school year or when their term was naturally ending. But from what you're saying, because that's what I thought I understood when I read it, which means it's not clear, right? So what you're saying is actually, if somebody is vacant, then it sparks or it triggers an application process that then is the trigger for a new person to come in. We don't fill positions is what I think I hear you saying. Like, I can't say, I want somebody in District 9, this is that person. You're saying, no, they have to go through a real application process, and that's the trigger. So we just want to say that to be clear inside of there. No worries. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a loophole. So it actually benefits us in this situation because now we'll have those 2-year terms and we'll naturally have a staggered amount, but we're just adding the language retroactively so that moving forward, we won't have this issue. And then I think that kind of solves it. So colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or I think we have the answer, but just want to ask it, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion? I think the obvious answer here, and I don't want to, so if you object to keeping it for further discussion, then please object.
I am objecting for keeping this for further discussion. I guess my only question, because I feel like I'm very clear on where we've been for the last months. But just so I'm clear, the trigger of application means that's the start of their first term. So when they first put in their application, that's the start of their first term, correct? So those people who have been in 2 years, it will trigger the end of their term, and therefore they must reapply if they didn't already hit the 2 terms. Okay, I'm just making sure that I'm clear. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'm good with us talking it here. I feel like we are all set. That's just my perspective.
And I'm going to put that language there so we're clear that if they want to apply for a second term, they can have it. They can do that so that it's very clear they're still going through the application process again for their second term.
Absolutely. I'm ready to move it forward. I move that we move this forward for action.
with the additional amendments.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you so much for adding that piece in based on discussion for today, what we talked about for the additional amendments.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, I don't disagree with that. I will say that Mrs. Welsh, I lost my thought. So if there are no objections to moving this forward for action with the amendments included, and that includes the staggered terms, and I think nothing really else is what we're saying here.
No, there was something else. I'm so glad you said that. So can Ms. Welch just talk about what the amendments
Yeah.
are that she wrote down? That way we're clear. Okay, thank you. I know we talked a lot about this. No worries.
So I thought I was supposed to add something about staggered terms, just that our that's what we're moving towards, a staggered term, but that also that if a member would like to do another term, they're allowed to do 2 consecutive terms, but to get another term, they still have to go through the application process. If that's what you want. If not, we won't put that in there, but I don't know any other way, like to be fair, how do you, I don't know, I mean,
I
that's.
think I think Mrs. Welsh, you're going off of the recommendation that that Vice Chair Walker made about the chair staying for an additional period of time because she was concerned about everyone leaving and they're kind of being like that knowledge about how PCAC runs leaving. But now that we'll have members that'll be on, I think she's no longer seeing that as necessary. So we're moving forward with the staggered terms, but not extending anyone's stay.
Beyond 2 terms, because
Yeah.
the chair can also have 2 terms.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. All in, Board Member Boozer Strother.
Thanks, sorry, I just wanted to be clear that you're saying that you do have to apply again and you're limited to 2 terms, but you must apply again, which I think is good for the health of this body. Is that the agreement?
Okay, can I just ask this? This is just no, oh, sorry, go ahead. Because we didn't talk about this piece here. Mr. Briggs, is it okay if I ask the question? Okay, just real quick. If they're already within their term, I'm playing devil's advocate here. If they're already within their term and they want to run for a second term, can their internal group just simply vote on it? I'm just wondering, I just don't know what because we're already saying they can have a second term, right? And I'm just wondering, can we leave it internally for them to vote? Or are we just saying across the board, we want the standard and the trigger to always be an application? Either way is fine. I'm just wondering about they are their mini, own little governing.
I think for equity's sake, and I think that I see Board Member Boozer Strother, for equity's sake, I feel like it's only fair that you go back through the application process. If there are 12 other applicants, you are considered like any other. You don't get any preferential treatment because you've been.
That's fine.
So that's how I would see it, just to make sure that to your point, we have fresh blood, new ideas. We love committed people, and there are ways to continue to do the work, but it may not be.
I'm on board, y'all. I'm on board. I just wanted to throw it out. I'm on board. I'm in.
Yeah.
Application across the board, application trigger, done and done.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm in.
Board Member Boozer Strother, anything else?
No, that covered it. I appreciate the points made.
Okay. All right. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 1500 and move it forward for action with the amendments that we've made. Do you have any questions about what those amendments are? You are clear. Okay, great. We can move forward.
Woohoo! Congratulations, everybody.
Some confetti falling. Yeah, we definitely need something for that one. But that's huge for us to be moving that forward after months. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, you just don't know. We've been talking about this in September. I'm not. Okay, so item 4.6, Policy 1700, Disabilities Issues Advisory Board. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on Policy 1700 Issues Advisory.
Quick question, Committee Chair. Did we review policy 0125, non-discrimination, 4.4?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Do you need any notes from that one? Okay, great. All right, so Mrs. Welsh, turning the floor to you for Policy 1700.
The Disabilities Issues Advisory Board. So I think we had left it, and I think Chair Briggs, you had actually asked for, if there were recommendations for changes in the policy, that the board members would provide that. And I think you even sent out like a sort of a Google survey that they could put that information in. But at this point, I am not aware of anything that has come back to you. Is that true?
We are good to go. I talked to board member Rout this today, and she mentioned that she has no additional pieces for the policy. I have not heard back from board member Adam Stafford, which is likely good news. So I think that we, not to say that we don't want to always hear from our board members about things, but no news is good news too. So I think we're in a good space.
So my recommendation at this point would be not to make revisions to this policy at this point in time, but instead, the board does have a policy that says Disabilities Issues Advisory Board. So I would say that probably the board needs to move forward and implement it and start up the Disabilities Issues Advisory Board. Because it gives specifics about who needs to be the members. And then if they implement this, they might have it might tell them where, like, any changes they might want to make to it, which they can come back and it can be put on the work schedule for next year.
Awesome. So the floor is now open for discussion and comments.
Well,
I recognize Dr. Juanita Miller.
I just want for the record to say that this is a duplication of efforts. The state already has a disabilities commission, and we have representatives from our county on that state commission. So I'm still not clear on the purpose of us formulating another committee.
Okay, well,
exactly. You can do what you want. I'm just making it clear that I disagree with that proposal, and I said it from the beginning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Juanita Miller, for your thoughts on that, recognizing Mrs. Welsh.
So I would say that because there is a policy in place right now, that it really is the responsibility of the board to implement it. However, if the board is saying or the committee is saying we don't think this policy, there's a need for it or something, then of course the next step would be to rescind the policy. And I don't know, that would then have to be a committee decision, as well as it would have to go to the full board for a vote if you were going to rescind that policy.
So you're saying that there's a policy already in place?
Yes, it's
what we're doing is reactivating it. Is that what I'm to understand?
Or activating it.
Okay.
When was it first instituted? That's what I'm not clear on, because this came up before and it did not go anywhere. So now I'm hearing that we're going to move forward with this committee. And I'm just not clear on how it got to this.
It says it was amended on May 14th, 2015.
That's what I'm saying. And nothing has been done since 2014. Nothing, which says that, to me, evidently it was not of a critical need to have for the board to have a committee. But if there are board members that feel that we should institute it, then so be it. But I'm just not supporting it.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Juanita Miller. Mrs. Welsh will take under consideration your recommendations, which was the requests from board members via the last Policy and Governance Committee meeting in December. So we will, there are no actions, whether it is to have further discussion or to take action on this policy. The recommendation is to activate the policy. And that is to the board's discretion to determine. So that's a discussion that we can have collectively around the next steps there. I guess
let me clarify what you're saying. So we're not moving forward with this committee at this time.
We're not moving forward with any changes to the policy at this time.
To the policy, okay.
But we do have a recommendation from Mrs. Welsh that we can provide to board members based on their initial request.
Okay.
Provide to the board.
Thank you.
I hope that you have notes absolutely on that, so we can have next steps to share with the board. Vice Chair Walker.
Yes, I'm sorry for the going up and down. The reason is because Ms. Welsh, are you sharing what those recommendations are here today? And the reason why, or are you sharing it at another time? The reason why I'm asking is because I understood this to be that based on Comar, we have to have this. This is a state law that we actually have to have this. And by way of that, we already had a committee that was already established, a policy, I'm sorry, for a committee that was already established. It has been defunct, I'll say. It hasn't been operating as of today. So therefore, there's no change to the policy because the policy already exists. Do I understand that to be the case, or what's the recommendations that we're having right now?
So first of all, the requirement in Comar actually goes to what they currently have, what special ed currently has in place, which is the CSAC, Special Education Advisory Committee. And there's all these specific requirements in Comar about it, and they do meet those requirements. In fact, MSDE lays out specifically all the area, what that committee is supposed to do. So that's one separate committee. One separate requirement that doesn't impact the board. In fact, generally speaking, it's set up, and you'll see on MSD's website that talks about actually involving the directors, in our case, associate superintendent of special ed, because they really want to make sure that it reaches the ears of the person running special ed to ensure all these changes or whatever the committee members want or feel important that get addressed. But saying that, what you have in place right now, so we do have another policy out there that says that the Board of Ed can have basically as many advisory committees as it wants to have. So you have a policy here that is saying that you can they want a special ed advisory committee. So, but it hasn't been implemented, or if it had, it's been years and years ago. So all I'm saying is at this point in time, because we haven't gotten any feedback from board members about what they would like to see in the new policy, that maybe they should go ahead and it's just my recommendation. It doesn't mean anything, but that they should just go ahead and implement this policy because it does exist. So they can, they can have their committee.
Okay. I hear that. I thought part of what we talked about last time was that it was duplicative in nature, but that's not what I'm hearing right now. What I think I'm hearing from you is that this is not duplicative. There's not already a group that is looking at special education. And so for this committee to be kicked off, which special education does need attention. So let me just say that. But what's happening? Yeah, we talked about CCAC, right? And
Yes.
that does exist. And so is the partnership with CCAC, that was the duplicative nature that I was talking about. I just couldn't remember the name. Yeah.
And you're correct. We did talk about it being duplicative because of all the things the CCAC does. However,
Right.
the board always has the right to have their own advisory committee, even if it
Yes.
duplicates some of the efforts of the CCAC, it still absolutely has that right. So
Perfect. So maybe we just send the interested parties to the CCAC to decide what next and put that thing in order, and then go back to Mr. Briggs about what policy needs to be updated. I thought the action from the last time, because we did have some proponents that were on the line and some advocates from the board that wanted to kick this off. And I thought that they were taking away the next steps to engage with the CCAC and then make a recommendation on what policy would look like for this committee. I don't know, Mr. Briggs or Ms. Welsh, how you walked away from that, but it was a long discussion. I felt like that was the takeaway. Can you just remind me of where we ended with that, please?
So we had a number of recommendations that came from Board Member Adam Stafford and Board Member Rao around areas where the policy could be improved, even though there were some duplicative pieces to it. And so I think that was what we requested of them, was to share those specific things that they'd like to see. So I think with that in mind, the discussion here was around revising the policy that currently exists. So the recommendation is no longer that we need to revise the policy. The recommendation is you need to take action on the policy. So that is what we're going to give to board members moving forward. As far as what the Policy and Governance Committee does, which is revise, repeal a policy, we don't have that responsibility here. But the board is responsible for taking action, implementing, policies that aren't in existence.
So you're saying we're gonna excuse me,
Yes,
you're
Dr.
you're saying that we're gonna move forward with an old policy and bring it to the board and have the board, the full board updated.
Take under consideration the recommendation from Mrs. Welsh, and the board can do with it what they will with that recommendation.
Well, can I just say one thing for Member Briggs? It really should be the recommendation of the committee. I'm just throwing out a recommendation to all of you that you right now, because I don't have any information about how they'd like to see the policy revised, that maybe the choice might be to go ahead and implement what you have in place right now, and then from there that will give the direction on maybe changes that do need to be made to the policy.
Yep, I think we're saying
So the people that made the recommendation are here, and we're trying to make a decision based on their concern as expressed in the last meeting. I'm going to move to put this on hold until the next policy and governance meeting.
Can I add to that friendly movement or amendment, just an amendment to that motion? Would you be okay if we were to say for the two advocates, because I think we're all advocates for special ed, is that they get with CCAC and make the recommendations to the policy. It's just no need of us moving forward an old policy. It's not helpful. It's going to end up back in our laps. And because they had the rigor to be able to do this and they knew where their heads were, it probably behooves us to allow them, even outside of the committee, to get with CCAC, which already exists, put together some proposed language, and then get it back to our chair of this committee so that then we can review it. That would be my recommendation. I wonder if you are amenable to that.
I want to say, I just want to add in and interject here. We are, we've got a number of policies that we need to review and we need to, revise, and they're on our agenda. And according to what Mrs. Welsh shared in my conversations with board members, they don't have any additional kind of points on this. So we don't need to keep this on the agenda per se. I think the recommendation is
perfect,
simple enough to say, this is how you can move forward. And if they would like to do that, then they have that as an option. But I think we've done the work of what they've requested of us, and we have a clear recommendation. So I don't think we need the amendment. I see Mr. Fitzpatrick, but I appreciate the amendment, Dr. Miller. Mr. Fitzpatrick, I see you put your hand down, so I think we can move forward. If all parties feel good here, I think this is one that we can kind of say we are good to move forward, and there are no actions that need to be taken, minus the recommendation. Okay, so we're gonna move forward. Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the discussions coming from your recommendations, which we appreciate. We're gonna move to item 4.8, policy 9210, chair. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on policy 9210, chair. Mrs. Welsh.
Okay, so this policy, we are, it's a bylaw, actually 9210, and we do currently have a bylaw 9210, which says chair, for the chair of the board. However, when 1079, House Bill 1079 got passed last year, it did lay out some specifics about the responsibility of the chair of the board. So that's why this bylaw is being revised. And so, of course, the first thing I did was put it into the format that that we do our policies, because this was a pretty old policy. And it was really just like a paragraph or two. This just talks about the board itself in terms of what it is. And then it talks about the purpose, which is the purpose of the policy is to establish the responsibilities of the chair of the board. And the only thing I did define in the policy, if you'll scroll down, Cindy, is bylaws, which is a set of rules established by an organization to regulate itself as allowed by state and federal laws and regulations. So then basically, as far as standards, it says the board shall elect the chair and vice chair from among its members during the board's annual meeting, which shall be held on the first Monday in December. And the election shall be by an individual recorded vote of each board member, and the term of the chair and vice chair shall be 2 years. So even though it's about the chair, I felt like we might as well also incorporate the vice chair. And then as far as the duties, I only have the duties of the chair here. And so the duties, and this is coming from 1079, as well as some language we had in the old bylaw. They call the chair calls the board meetings, presides at public meetings of the board, makes standing committee appointments, serves as a voting member of one state. Now, this is actually for what we do and what sits in our, I want to say, policy 8100. Serves as a voting member of one standing committee and serves as an ex officio non-voting member of the remaining standing committees. And then serves as a primary contact of communications between the board and the superintendent, represents the views of the board in all communications and correspondence, determines the agenda for board meetings after consultation with other board members and the superintendent, administers the board in accordance with the bylaws adopted by the board, and signs contracts authorized and approved by a majority of the board members. And then as far as this just sort of gives you succession language, in the absence of the chair, the vice chair shall perform the duties ordinarily assigned to the chair. And then if both the chair and the vice chair are temporarily unavailable to carry out the above responsibilities, the remaining members of the board shall select another board member to serve in the capacity of the chair. And in the event of a vacancy in the office of the chair or vice chair, the remaining board members shall elect a replacement at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. And then I just have under implementation, it is the responsibility of the chair and board members to carry out the responsibilities in compliance with this bylaw. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Vice Chair Walker.
Hey, Ms. Welsh, thank you so much for pulling this together. One of the things I didn't see, and it probably won't happen again after this year, but it could, is that in the absence, I didn't see, it used to say in the absence of the chair, the vice chair will become chair. That isn't what you just said. I think what I just heard you say was in the absence of the chair, that the board will select a new chair. Did you just say that?
I said two things. I said, in the absence of the chair, the vice chair shall perform the duties ordinarily assigned to the chair. And then I said, if both the chair and the vice chair are temporarily unavailable to carry out the above responsibilities, the remaining members of the board shall select another board member to serve in that capacity. And in the event of a vacancy in the office of the chair or vice chair, the remaining board members shall elect a replacement at the next regularly scheduled. But I hear what you're saying.
Oh, that should say and, not or. You see that last statement you said should say and, I believe, because I think what you're saying, you've already said the chair and then the vice chair. So in the absence of the chair, there will be the vice chair. In the absence of the vice chair, then members will then select someone to then sit in the chair role. I think that's an and, not an or. I'm sorry. Oh, let me get to your paper so I could really see it. That's what I heard you say. If both the chair and vice chair are temporarily unavailable to carry out.
But that's temporarily. I think that what I hear you asking, or what I think you're asking, if in fact the chair vacates that role,
yes,
then the vice chair would automatically move into the chair seat until the next formal election.
Yes. And so the next election, and I think this right here, the temporary unavailable piece, then we have to define temporary. So I think that the vice chair becomes the chair in the absence of the chair.
Okay.
It's clear.
Okay.
Now, until we have elections, like we already have, just so people looking on don't think that this is like for longevity, there is elections that we do have in the December timeframe. So until the December timeframe comes in, and of course you need to run for office as everyone else does as well.
But you have to clarify that statement, because it doesn't say until December. It says until the next board meeting. So if you're talking about the next annual, that it makes a difference. Because the way it's expressed now is that it's saying that if the vacancy occurs this month, well, the vice chair stays in that role until next month's meeting. And then the board would elect a new chair. But that's not the understanding that that should not be the case. It should be at the next annual meeting.
Okay, I think we're at time. So are there other discussions?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to butt in like that without raising my hand.
No problem. All right, I recognize Mr. Whitley.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll work with Robin offline, but I believe there's a provision in 1079 that addresses the special circumstances with the appointed members coming off in July. So I don't know if whether we need to address that specifically in this bylaw, because it probably won't happen again. But I do want to just make sure the board's aware that there is a provision in 1079 that addresses what's going to happen in July. So I can work with Ms. Welsh offline, and we can figure out whether the language needs to be added to this bylaw or whether it'll be excluded, since it won't happen again, at least in the lifetime of the legislation.
Great. We appreciate that additional comment. Are there any other discussion items or comments? Mrs. Welsh.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we're going to have language that talks about when there's a temporary situation about who fills in for who. But then we're also going to add language that says specifically, if in fact there is a vacancy in that chair position, then the vice chair would be placed into that position till the following, when you normally have your election, which is normally in December for that chair position. Is that what I'm hearing? So we're clear about that.
That's what my understanding is.
Okay.
Then that presents also, Robin, that Ms. Welsh, that also presents the question is, given that the vice chair would move into the chairmanship, that leaves a vacancy for the vice chair, which would require either the chair to appoint, or for the board to, language needs to be placed in there and how the vice chair would be replaced.
Well, I do have language that says in the event of vacancy in the office of chair or vice chair, but now we're going to change it for the vacancy of the chair. The vice chair will fill the position. So I can then keep the language where it says in the event of a vacancy in the office of the vice chair, the remaining board members shall elect a replacement at the next regularly scheduled meeting. Because you don't want to wait a whole year to replace the vice chair if the vice chair has already moved into the chair's position.
That's my point, but given, and I'm looking at the circumstance now, given that in June, you will be without a vice chair from June through December. So if you that's my concern. And the chair does need a partner. Because if the chair, the new chair does have to take a leave absence or something, there's no one as vice chair. So you would have to, the board would have to do a special election.
Okay.
And Cindy, if we can get the time back up for anyone who's speaking, if once they raise their hand and they recognize, we'll keep the timer just to stay on time. Are there any other comments or discussions? Okay, Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for that, playing out the scenarios right there. In the event of a temporary notion that a temporary position that needs to be filled, the chair moves to the vice chair role, and then I would be amenable to the vice chair, who's now the chair, to appoint someone in the temporary role until the next elections happen at the next board meeting. I will also be absolutely fine with having a special meeting that's called. But the reason why I say that is because in this instance, which will not always be the instance, I think that it's a lot of disruption when you have a special meeting in a short-term frame. You see, and then there's going to be elections again in December. December is coming. And so it's only a 6-month time frame. And I just think disruption in the midst of, so that's more for the committee to discuss with a 6-month time period, it feels like disruption versus having continuity until the election happens versus having 2. Does that make sense to everybody? On what I'm saying, the scenario?
Well, I'm not understanding your scenario. Are you saying that the new chair would just appoint another board member to serve in the capacity of vice chair until such time that you have your annual elections?
That is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is that I'll be happy to do a special election. I just am saying that Lolita's perspective is that that could look like disruption for a short-term fix for a 6-month period, as in this instance here. And anything can happen in the future. Somebody could get hit by a bus, but if that's the case, then we just need to be able to take a look at the time frames and not have disruption, but instead continuity. But I'm amenable to a special election. I just wanted to put that out there for folks to just start thinking about and considering.
Okay.
Well, I would just think that
covered what Mr. Whitley said, so I would have to just take a look at that. I just wasn't familiar with that piece of the bill. Thank you.
Got 10 seconds left. So is there anything else?
Thank you for that. No, I just wasn't clear on, I am clear on what Mr. Whitley said was in 1079. I just haven't seen that there, so I'll go back and take a look at it. Thank you.
Okay. So, Mrs. Welsh, to the best of your ability from the information you were given, if you can make the updates to the policy. I know it was a lot because I was kind of like, feel like I was doing some calculus here. So if we can do, if we can take under consideration those recommendations, I think we can bring the policy back for further discussion, because we want to make sure that it really meets the needs. I think for the sake of time, because we're saying this, we're saying it, and it might just not be landing. So we can ask those additional questions via email, for any, additional questions we have about this. So colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
continue for further discussion.
Okay.
Second.
Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 9210 and bring it back for further discussion at the next PNG meeting. We're going to move to 4.9, item 4.9, bylaw 9271, student board member. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on the new policy into student board member. Mrs. Welsh.
Okay, Cindy, can you put that up a minute? So there's just a couple minor changes that need to be made to the policy. So if you can scroll down to the next paragraph. Okay, so I didn't highlight. So there was the question about doing dual enrollment. Would it be possible to make this as a dual enrollment course? I have spoke to academics numerous times, and they said that it is not a possibility to be able to do that based on what course requirements would be required at the college level and what courses they offer. So their recommendation, instead of making it dual enrollment, that because the student board member can opt to receive 1 unit of social studies credit for serving on the board, that this course would be given weighted course value. So in essence, the course would be they'd get a credit indicating that they basically, unless I guess they were not a good board member, they weren't in good standing or something, but they would get a credit. They would get a grade of, let's suppose they get a grade of like an A or a 4 for an A. And then because it would be weighted, it would actually carry on. And if you scroll down a minute because I think the definition will help clear it up, to keep going, weighted course value. The weighted course value is determined by adding 1 unit to the grade given, so that the student board member would actually it would help to, not to say that they would need it, but it would help to raise their GPA by that 1 unit, adding 1 unit to the grade given. So, and that would be due to the fact that the student board member is required to devote a lot of time to the board, and there's a lot of work involved, and they're engaged in a lot of different activities. So I didn't know what you thought about this, but that was the recommendation from academics. So I wanted to incorporate it there. And we can certainly change it. The other thing I did change in good standing, I had put a 2.5, and Raina had pointed out that to even be in the student government association, that you must maintain a 3.0. So I did make that change. And then I think the only other change, if you scroll down, that needed to be made had to do with the reimbursement. So if you keep going down further, First, go back to this one. So the student board member will receive local mileage-based reimbursement for use of personal vehicle or for the adult transporting the student board member in accordance with, I keep scrolling down, with the policies and reimbursement rates established by the school, for school system employees, as well as reimbursement for the actual cost of items such as parking and tolls. So the conversation had been the whole issue of when they get reimbursed, who gets the money if it is like the student can't drive, so their parent, let's say, is always driving them to the board meetings or driving them to some school, function, board function that they have to go to. And that everyone sort of was in consensus that the documentation for the mileage and everything would be it would have to be given to the, to be able to get the money, just like you as board members have to do. But it would actually, the money would go directly to the board member, to the student board member. And then the only other thing I added that had to do with college scholarships would be that the student shall be in good standing, which is defined in the definition section. I think those were the last changes that people had requested.
Great. Thank you so much, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Okay, seeing no hands raised. Colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion? If you object to advancing it for further action, please object now. Otherwise, we will move forward. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendation made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on the new policy and and move it forward for action.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to move to item 5.0, items for review or action. There are 5 items for review or action. First is item 5.1, policy artificial intelligence. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy artificial intelligence to the full board for recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. So it has been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the new policy. Mrs. Welsh.
Okay. So the policy itself is really lays out, talks about what artificial intelligence is, and then excuse me, I did add a definition on ed tech vendors. And a vendor that offers ed tech, a combination of education and technology, hardware and software designed to enhance teacher-led learning in classrooms and improve student education outcomes, because we did have that referenced in the policy. So I wanted to make sure we had a definition for it. And then it goes on to talk about the standards. So the first part of the standards are addressing the planning for the implementation of the AI instructional and the work setting. And it does lay out it does talk about the fact that the superintendent will establish a cross-functional joint working group that includes numerous divisions across the system, as well as, when it's appropriate, invite PGCPS students and representatives from higher ed to discuss specific topics that the work group is addressing. And then it talks about that the work group has to address the following characteristics, which are really critical aspects of AI. It has to do with privacy and data security, the notice and explanation of how AI is being incorporated within the ed tech system, the algorithmic discrimination protections to make sure that we're not seeing bias in what we're using. And then transparent, accountable, and responsible use by defining the roles and responsibilities for various stakeholders. And there's a definition in the front that talks about stakeholders, which are PGCPS students, staff, parents, and community members. And then the process to address errors and unintended consequences. And then human alternatives in terms of using the AI and ensuring that there's things in place for human oversight and intervention. And also language in there to require the ed tech vendors to explicitly disclose the integration of AI within their products. And so actually there's, just tonight, we've talked about 2 areas that vendors that are contractors, that the contract language we use with our contractors are gonna have to make sure they incorporate, one to do with the copyright and one to do also with the AI. So those were all the things that when the work group is meeting that they need to be working on addressing. And then because we are already using AI, we have a whole section on our website about AI. And although it's not used extensively from an instructional standpoint, in fact, it's minimally used right now at this point because they're still studying it pretty carefully, but it does lay out the guidelines for use of AI. And so one is that they have anything that's going to be used in a classroom must be approved by the superintendent and or his designee, and there has to be appropriate professional development made available for all staff that are utilizing the AI, and this professional development needs to really include ethical principles associated with the use of AI and the relevant laws and regulations that address the use of AI, plus best practices associated with use of AI. Then, and other guidelines, AI should never be used to replace teaching by classroom teachers in the classroom. It's merely a supplemental tool. And when it's necessary, parent consent will be obtained prior to offering certain AI services to students. And the use of AI must comply with state and federal laws and regulations, including FERPA. And teachers will guide and monitor students' use of AI in the classroom setting and during instruction, ensuring that it aligns with board policies and PGCPS, because the last thing we want is for teachers just to set kids on a computer and off it goes with their AI and the teacher isn't involved in the process. And then also we have that any use of AI must be cited to just as with other sources, and may not be submitted as an original work, and plagiarism and copyright infringement is prohibited. And it's the responsibility of staff to monitor for plagiarism. And then the other thing is staff should not rely on AI as a fact checker to confirm their work or research, because it might not always be accurate. And I've heard ever so many sources I've read do talk about the fact that frequently AI is not accurate. So it's really important to check the accuracy of the information you provide. And then in the inappropriate use of the AI in which the board policies or PGCPS administrative procedures will lay out have been violated will result in disciplinary action. And then the collaboration with the wider AI community by promoting knowledge, sharing best practices and participation to advance ethical AI development is critical. And it is very critical because this is so brand new and we need to make sure we're doing it correctly. And then the superintendent will be required to develop administrative procedure for these. And then the other thing is we did put in that the board as needed will review, assess, and revise as needed this policy on an annual basis due to the fact that there's evolving technologies and ethical consideration and feedback for stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Ms. Welsh. Colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the new policy to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation. Okay, so I see something. So board member Boozer-Strother.
Oh, thanks. I'm probably too late. I'll discuss it later.
You want to discuss it later?
Yeah, I'll discuss it when I have that opportunity as a board member who doesn't sit on the committee.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So the policy will be moved to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move to item 5.2, policy search and seizure. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy search and seizure to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the new policy. Mrs. Welsh.
Okay, so the policy itself is a new policy, and it was developed to ensure that there's a balance between maintaining a safe learning environment, but at the same time respecting students' rights. And so the policy provides guidelines for the use of search and seizure in the schools and the tracking of searches of students and their possessions to ensure that the searches are equitable and justified. It's also lays out the parameters under which a search may be conducted, and that emphasizing that the search of a student may be conducted if the authorized searcher has a reasonable suspicion at the inception of the search that the student is in possession of an item that's prohibited by the student code of conduct, and that's critically important, as well as any board policy, administrative procedure, or state or federal laws and regulation. The policy does focus on the importance of notifying parents of a student who has been searched immediately following the search. And then it also addresses things like searches on school property, teachers, searches of students on school-sponsored trips, appeals of searches and seizures, training of authorized searchers, and an annual report to the board regarding the number of searches and seizures segregated by students' race, ethnicity, gender, and disability. And that's it. That's sort of a summarization of everything.
Yeah, and this was a really good one. So thank you for all of your hard work on this. Colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the new policies to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move to item 5.3, policy student use of social media and portable electronic devices in schools. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy students' use of social media and portable electronic devices in schools to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second it. It's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the new policy. Mrs. Welsh.
So the policy, originally, we had the board policy 5132, portable electronic devices in the schools, and then which I had revised, and then I added, and then we started a new policy, student use of social, and then we were going to add a policy on students' use of social media, and then the recommendation was that we put the two together and make it one policy. So that's how we have student use of social media and portable electronic devices in schools. And so the portable electronic devices in schools actually includes a section addressing the students' use of social media. And what it does, it provides guidelines for appropriate conduct by students when using social media, as well as, and also holds students accountable for inappropriate use of portable electronic devices. So the policy was established to guide students to responsible and respectful use of social media, both within and outside of the school environment. And that social media to some degree can be used as for educational purposes if it aligns with the curriculum standards, but that students are prohibited from sharing, access inappropriate content that may disrupt the learning environment. And also, the policy addresses the parents' responsibility to monitor their child's use of social media. And staff and students are required to report to school administration any known incidents involving misuse of social media. Along with this, the policy then provides guidelines for students to use PEDs in a responsible and respectful manner. And the policy specifically lays out that students may only use a PED in designated areas of the school and at designated times, and while riding on the bus to and from school. And the only time they're allowed to use it for instructional purposes is when the school administrator approves it and the teacher says it's okay. It does talk about the fact that the students are prohibited from using their portable electronic devices to invade the privacy of another person, taking or transmitting nude or sexually explicit photos or videos, cyberbullying, using their PD in an illegal manner that would compromise academic integrity, or in a manner that violates the student code of conduct. And again, if there's violations of this policy, it could result in disciplinary action. So just as an aside, there is a bill out there that talks about that schools will be required to develop a policy that says specifically what we have in our policy about portable electronic devices. And basically saying students cannot be pulling portable electronic devices out whenever they want to, and they can only use it for instruction when the teacher has specified that, yes, they can use it for instruction. Even though we do have this policy that we're working on that's in line with what is mandated in the legislature, we have said that this would be something that we oppose only because you as a board said in your platform that the board wants to retain its authority and they don't want the legislature to take over the responsibility of governance. So when there's legislature that says there must be a policy, that's basically taking away the rights of the board to govern the school system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So, colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the new policies to the full board with recommendation to seek public comment?
I did have a question. I'm sorry, let me put my hand up. Can we recognize?
Yes, Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you so much. I did have a question. I love what we've done with this policy. Thank you so much. The only question I had was about pictures. What do you guys think about adding in, with your personal device, you are unable to take pictures of anyone without their notification, videos, or recording? Just wanted to see what you thought about that. Thank you for consideration. Okay. We would need to put pictures, videos, and recordings. All right, thank you. Trying to think about all the stuff I have in my own syllabus with these phones. It just moves so quickly, technology.
Yeah, Mrs. Welsh, what's the can you remind us what the current language was again?
So what we had was students are prohibited, they are prohibited from using PEDs in the following manner during the school day or on school property. Using PEDs in a manner that would be an invasion of privacy of another person. This includes using the PED to take audio recordings, pictures, or videos, but it's not as broad as what Board Member Walker is requesting. It just says recordings, pictures, and videos in the locker rooms or bathrooms at any time. So I could extend, include language that says just a blatant out, you cannot do this without the permission of the person that you're taking pictures of, as well as they absolutely, and this is important, they absolutely shouldn't even have their PEDs in the locker room or on, I should say, or in bathrooms.
Agreed.
Yeah, my point was, thank you very much for having that said, because I didn't even hear that part, Mr. Briggs. I think my point is that anywhere in the schoolhouse, so we can call out locker rooms because that's explicit and it should not be done, but also it's anywhere in the schoolhouse is where I was referring. Thank you.
Great. All right. So we do have an objection to this moving forward to seek public comment because we want to add that additional piece in there. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations from the Policy Committee and bring policy student use of social media and portable electronic devices in schools back to the next Policy Committee for further discussion, right? And we were.
No, mine wasn't if it was because of me, mine wasn't to bring it back, Mr. Briggs. Mine was actually just to have her add that language. I'm absolutely fine with it moving forward. It was very comprehensive in my belief.
Okay, so you just want to add those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fine with her to do that and us take it to the board. We worked hard on this. It sounds really good.
Okay. All right. So hearing no objections to seeking public comment with the additional pieces included in the policy will be moved to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move to item 5.4, Policy 1120, Public Information Act requests. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward Policy 1120, Public Information Action Act requests to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of Policy 1120. Mrs. Welsh.
So this policy, if you recall, just had two minor changes that needed to be made. One had to do with the requirements that were included in House Bill 636 from last year's legislative session, which was public information and inspection of email addresses and telephone numbers. And so one of the changes were that we no longer have to employees' home address, personal telephone numbers, including personal cell phone numbers and personal email addresses, are considered privileged and or confidential information are not subject to release. So that was an addition that we added as far as the personal email addresses and cell phone numbers. And then we did have to make one change as it relates to student records based on something we got from the Compliance Board for Public Information Acts, and which it said that indicate that the request for student records, including student directory information and student transfers, are covered by this policy, as well as Administrative Procedure 5125 and 5134. So previously, when a Public Information Act request came in for those for that kind of information, the OGC would refer the requester over to whatever the administrative procedures said that you can get this information from, which usually was that they had to go through the principal and probably the instructional director of the area office to get the information. And in essence, that is not true. I mean, you can get the information in that route, but if a person wants to file a public information request, then the information has to be provided through the public information request. So we did make that correction to the policy.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Welsh. Colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding policy 1120 to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move to our last policy, policy 5.5. Policy 5131.1, bus conduct. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward policy 5131.1, bus conduct, to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It is moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the policy 5131.1. Mrs. Welsh.
So this policy is a revised policy, and the purpose of it is to promote safe and orderly and respectful learning environment, and specifically on the school bus as it relates to conduct on the bus and the disciplinary measures that would be addressing inappropriate behavior traveling on the school bus. And it does require the superintendent to identify student behavior expectations for at 4 areas: waiting for the bus, boarding the bus, being transported on the bus, and exiting the bus. And these expectations of the policy are explained to school staff as well as the students. And then it goes on to talk about the fact that our school buses actually have audiovisual surveillance that's used on the school bus to promote orderly safety and security of the students, staff, and property. And that it is the requirement of the school system to ensure that parents are notified, staff, students, and parents are notified annually that the buses are equipped with audiovisual surveillance cameras, and that things that might be picked up on those surveillance cameras can be used in taking disciplinary action against a student. So that's basically it in a nutshell for that policy.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Welsh. Colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding policy 5131.1 to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move to 6.0, committee recommendations, new business and governance, which there are none. So we're going to move to item 7.0, follow-ups and next steps. And this is 7.1. Follow-ups with previous meetings will be posted on board docs upon receipt. Item 7.2, next steps. The next Policy and Governance Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 13, 2024 at 5 p.m. This meeting will be virtual, so please check the PGCPS board webpage for more information. Finally, we are at closing, item 8.1, closing remarks and adjournments. I want to say thank you, everyone, for a great meeting, for your participation, for your pre-work, your post-work, and also if you're viewing, for you sticking around and being so dedicated. These meaningful discussions around board policies is essential to our school system running effectively. Colleagues, are there any additional business to bring before the committee this evening?
No, just a thank you.
Thank you. So hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the January 30, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Is there she said, is there a second? There is a second. And it has been moved and seconded. Any objections? Okay, hearing none, the time is now 8:20. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great week and see you at the next Policy and Governance Committee.
Thank you so much.
Great evening, everyone.